Thank you, everybody, and thank you, members. The Committee on State Affairs will come to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Hunter.
Here.
Hernandez.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Smithy. Raymond. Here. Guerin.
Here.
Ian. Anchia.
Here.
Turner. Here. Metcalf. Here. Dean. Slauson. Here. Spiller.
Here.
The quorum is present.
All right. We do have a quorum. As a reminder to everybody, we're not going to be taking public testimony today. All testimony is invited only. And due to the number of witnesses registered to testify today, we'll be limiting testimony to 5 minutes per each witness that testifies. There is an overflow room in E2030. And as a reminder to all that plan to testify, please ensure that you're registered through the electronic witness affirmation system that is located on the tablets in the hallway. And if you're having any problem registering, please see our assistant clerk, Isabella Huerta, and she will assist you. And please also remember that when you testify in front of our committees, you are testifying under oath, and we are required to testify fully and truthfully. And in addition, because there are no bills or resolutions to be considered or voted on during these interim hearings, all witnesses will register to testify neutrally, as the purpose of these meetings is to gather information in order to compile the committee's interim report. And today's hearing is also being live streamed on the House website, www.house.texas.gov/video-audio. And members of the public wishing to submit comments on today's hearing may do so through the public portal until the hearing is adjourned. Please note Representative Dean is here. Pursuant to House Rule 4, Section 20B, the Committee on House Administration has approved a process for the electronic submission and posting of public comments for each item on today's agenda. The public comments submitted through the portal will be posted on the Electronic Legislative Information Systems, TLIS, TLO, and the House website after the comment period is closed. Directions of how to submit public comments on the portal can be found on the meeting notice for this hearing. And members, I want to introduce you to our new committee clerk. This is Margot Fox. So, Margot, we're glad to have you. Chairman Anchia and I are glad to have another lawyer involved with this committee. That's all we'll have to say. But anyway, we are going to start the testimony, everybody. We're going to have panels that we start with. And so would our first panel start coming up to the 4 seats, and would Mr. Gleason, Mr. Vegas, Ms. Haltman come forward? And members, what we're doing on the first panel, we're going to hear testimony regarding the Public Utility Commission of Texas, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and the Office of Public Utility Council. And what I'm going to do is have each individual give their 5 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions of the entire panel from the membership. And so, to my clerk and assistant clerk, are my lighting timers ready?
Yes, sir.
Good. I just want to make sure our invited testimony has not forgotten time limits, just for everybody to remember. Anyway, so our very first will be on the panel will be Mr. Gleason. And go ahead and start the clock. And Thomas, go ahead and state your name, your position, and then give us your overview.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thomas Gleason, Chairman of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Mr. Chairman, I'll start by saying I appreciate that you hired a great clerk, but your gain was our loss in losing Margot to this committee, but we're happy to see her here. And I'm sure you're all as equally as tired as I am after watching the Fighting Texas Aggie baseball team win last night and heading to Omaha. Just as tired as myself and Representative Metcalf are probably. So So for a general update this morning, my plan is to go over just a couple things. One, kind of where we are organizationally with me moving from executive director to chairman, to go over a couple of the major policy initiatives from last session as it pertains to market design, and then talk about the Texas Energy Fund briefly. I'll hope to get through this in 4 minutes and 8 seconds. So, so with me becoming the chairman of the Public Utility Commission, we had an opening at executive director. Hopefully by now, all of you have met our new executive director, Connie Corona. She's sitting back there. She has an abundance of expertise in the electric industry. She was the deputy executive director at the PUC for the entire time I was executive director. There's no one better suited to lead this agency into the next chapter for all the work that we have to done, and we're extremely blessed. The state is blessed to have her be willing to accept that position, and we're extremely thankful for her. With that as well, we have a new deputy executive director, Barksdale English, who was the head of our enforcement division. Again, a ton of experience in the electric industry. He's worked at the PUC for a number of years. And so I'm happy to say that the organization is staffed and ready to move forward. You may remember in 2021 when Winter Storm Uri hit, I testified a lot about the number of employees we had at that point. Our FTE cap was 209. I'm happy to say that today our FTE cap is set at 283. And a lot of that is in part to y'all's work in working with us and hearing our needs. We have hired a number of people. We've increased our staff by about 17% since the end of last session. The other thing that I'm excited about is, you may recall, I testified in this committee that there was a period of quarters after Winter Storm Uri where our turnover exceeded 30% annualized. The good news is that's down to less than 10%. We've gotten a lot of resources to recruit and retain staff. Our salaries are now more than competitive. And I think that, we've turned the corner on our hiring and recruiting at the agency. And so I'm thankful for that. I think the agency is well positioned moving forward. So you should have received a handout from us, a slide deck. If you have that in front of you and you turn to page 5, I'm not going to go through all of this, but that lays out the major market design legislation, both from Senate Bill 3 in the 87th legislature and HB 1500 in the 88th legislature. I will note a couple of things. One, we heard a lot of testimony last session about the reliability standard. We're in the process of adopting a reliability standard for the ERCOT region. On Thursday, this Thursday in a few days, at our open meeting, we will be having a rule that is published that sets forth what the parameters for that reliability standard are going to be. That'll run through our normal rules process. We'll get input from stakeholders and market participants, and hopefully come out in August with a finalized adopted rule that for the first time sets a mandatory reliability standard for the ERCOT region. Additionally, the DRRS, this was in House Bill 1500. It was the newest ancillary service that you all put into statute, Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service. I'm happy to say that that is also on a path to getting completed. You may remember that in the bill, we were asked to complete that by December of this year. After taking some input from different stakeholders and from legislative members, we asked ERCOT to delay that so that they could do it properly, and Pablo may speak to this more when he testifies. But I think at this point, we're hopeful that that will get done, hopefully by the end of 2026. I think that it's a key ancillary service to ensure that we have a reliable grid moving forward. And last I'll touch on is the PCM. Obviously, HB 1500 had a number of guardrails. The most prominent was the $1 billion net price cap. Where we are in that is we've put out questions asking stakeholders for input on parameters around the PCM program, and we're endeavoring to complete a cost-benefit analysis that's required by that statute. My hope is we'll get that done by hopefully the end of November, the beginning of December, so we'll have that number for you all as we discuss market design going into the next legislative session. I think that's the first key piece that we have to see, because the worst outcome would be for us to implement a PCM that has a $1 billion price cap and we don't see any real benefit to the reliability of the system. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to talk about TEF if you'd like, or I'm happy to just take questions.
We're going to follow the 5-minute.
Yes, sir.
Courtney, go ahead and state your name and who you're with.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Courtney Yaltman with the Office of Public Utility Council. I'm the Chief Executive and Public Counsel there. We provided you as well with some slides just to give you a brief overview real quick to remind you we are the designated advocate for residential and small consumers in the public utility proceedings. Our main work consists of representing consumer interest in contested cases through litigation, projects, and rulemakings at the Public Utility Council. Then also, as the Chief Executive, I sit on the ERCOT board and advocate for consumers there as well. And then I'm also a non-voting member of the Texas Reliability Entity. We also sit on a number of task force like TERC, Texas Energy Reliability Council, and also the Texas Coordinated Council for Veteran Services. In general, OPUC is involved in different cases. I would say about 2/3 of our cases are made up of electricity, and 1/3 of our cases are made up of water cases. That chart is before you in your slideshow as well. The cases for electricity would be anything from a CCN or a base rate case being brought before us, or it could be a transmission utility coming forth for TCOS. Then with the water cases, you'll also have base rates, and more frequently now, after some legislation passed, you'll have a sale, transfer, and merger case that will come forth, and that is a bigger water utility purchasing a smaller water utility, which has been very helpful for those smaller cases. On slide 4, I will have you look at, it's kind of an overview of OPUC in numbers. So we at OPUC participated in 63 contested cases in 2023. We had 3 cases at the at state courts. We appealed them to state courts. And then we had 32 rulemaking and projects at the Public Utility Commission. In total, that participation contributed to consumer bill savings of $632 million. So that's about $251 for every $1 you appropriated to OPUC. I will then have you turn to, it will be your slide 8. This is an overview of some of the work we do when consumers call in and talk to OPUC in general. They can find us through our website. They can contact us through that, through email and telephone. One of the items that I outlined when I first took over the job was that we needed to revamp our website, make it more consumer-friendly and consumer-usable. We are currently doing that. It is not up and running yet, but that is something that is still in the process, and we hope to have that up very soon. That will have more resources available just at the click of a button. You will be able to pull up information and help the consumer without them even needing to call. In general, if they do call us, they'll call about billing issues, seeking financial assistance, or perhaps general questions about how to file a complaint if they need to do that. Our office at OPUC, we do not have the financial assistance in-house. We will point them in direction to find that if it's needed. Then on slide, I believe it's your slide 9, it'll go through as you know, last session, along with the PUC and ERCOT, we underwent the sunset process. I'm happy to report that we have implemented and completed all the recommendations from sunset. So that's something we worked hard on. We've also obviously been working hard at the Utility Commission with many projects. A few that will be of the most interest would be we helped formulate a rule for the sale, transfer, and merger of those water cases. It's been something that we advocated greatly for, to have that phased-in rate when someone does purchase a water utility so that the consumer does not experience that rate shock. We've also engaged in some rulemaking on a new pilot program for smart thermostats to help improve energy efficiency and also demand response in the home so that the residents could see those benefits as well. Finally, I will talk about some of the things we see coming forth that will be of greatest interest to you. We have been working with the PUC and stakeholders on that reliability standard that's been so important. We've filed comments and participated in a workshop to give that consumer perspective that's so important. We have resiliency plans, that is more legislation that you passed last session that will be coming forth, and those are contested, so we won't talk greatly, but that'll be something that will be interesting for you to follow. And then we also look forward to participating in the ancillary services and the study that will be coming forth from the PUC and ERCOT. So in general, we continue to work and advocate for consumers in all those areas. I will go ahead and stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Pablo, go ahead and state your name and your position.
Good morning. Pablo Vegas. I'm the president and CEO of ERCOT. Good morning, Chair Hunter, Vice Chair Hernandez, and members of the State Affairs Committee. Thank you for your engagement this morning. So I'm going to spend my time focusing a little bit on the current market design activities that ERCOT is undertaking, as well as discussing some of the growth in electricity demand in Texas and kind of the opportunity to shape our planning and to make some adjustments to our planning processes to be able to accommodate this accelerating growth picture. Anyone who's following this electric industry discussion is hearing a lot about the insatiable demand for electricity coming from data centers and artificial intelligence. But in Texas, it's a little broader than that. We're seeing industrial electrification on top of that in the oil and gas industry that's driving tremendous growth. We're also just starting to see the tremendous potential of the hydrogen economy and everything associated with that. So the green hydrogen, green ammonia, and the downstream businesses from that, the growth in that area is just starting to show up in our demand forecast as well. The Inflation Reduction Act has had a big part in fueling a lot of this electric growth, and we still haven't seen the full effects of that realized here in Texas. And that's on top of the incredible electric growth we've seen just because Texas is doing so well economically. And we see a lot of migration into Texas, both businesses and individuals, and that growth has exceeded what the United States has seen for the last decade. So when you couple all of that together, there's an explosive, highly high electric growth demand picture ahead of us that is really pushing us to rethink how we do planning here in ERCOT. If you look at slide 2, the market design activities, I won't repeat what Chair Gleason already covered, but I will point out that on the reliability standard, the new construct of it, where we look at not only the frequency of potential outages, but also the duration of how long they could be and the magnitude, how many people could be affected by them. That combination is a very unique combination. And grids around the world are looking at how we are doing this to understand whether this is going to work, how it will develop, how it will translate into the market design. So there's a lot of eyes on this, and it's a very robust and interesting way to look at reliability that I think is going to serve Texas very well when we finish that work. We're on schedule for the pieces and parts to that. We expect this to be considered at the next commission meeting with a rule around it by the end of the summer. There are several components to that. One is the value of lost load. You've heard that. That's going to be worked on and ideally finished by the end of August. And then the cost of new entry, CONE, that's a study that's going on, and we expect that work to be done largely by the end of this month. All of those work together to help define a reliability standard. Another very important piece of work we're doing is the real-time co-optimization. This is where we improve the efficiency of the wholesale power market by dispatching the generation resources based on their lowest cost and more efficiently. And so we can move the resources that are providing energy to the resources that are providing ancillary services very fluidly, and it has a potential to save the wholesale market billions of dollars. That project is on schedule and is scheduled to go live in the middle to the first part of 2026. Regarding DRRS, that's the new Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service that was authorized in House Bill 1500. We have created a protocol revision already at the end of last month. We're focusing right now on just generation resources, thermal generation resources. We are not including in this current definition batteries. Batteries could be included if that was the intent of the legislature. However, in order to do that, there are some more significant and extensive changes to the back office systems to enable that today would not support batteries being able to serve in that capacity in the first iteration. We also are not including load in that definition right now. We heard through the legislative intent discussions that this was more about dispatchable generation resources being supported, and load is load, not generation. And so in this first iteration, we're looking at really just dispatchable thermal resources that could serve the needs of DRRS. Based on the schedule and how things are looking, it's probably would be implemented immediately following real-time co-optimization. RTC is really the driving project, and we think that needs to get done first, and then DRRS would follow that. And then Chair Gleason covered PCM, and we're on track with the questions and the upfront design work. We plan to have that ready for your consideration at the end of this year. I'm just going to quickly talk, based on the slides that I've got in front of you, the broader storyline is that the change in load from last year when we looked at the long-term picture, which was 2029, to this year when we look at it in 2030, we've seen almost a 50% increase in the total ERCOT peak demand from one period to the next. 40 gigawatts of additional load coming from all this new opportunity that's coming to Texas. So we're going to be adapting our planning to be able to figure out how to incorporate that load, send the right signals to generators so generators can develop their resources in the right places, and then look at our transmission planning. I put in here a slide on how Texas plans transmission compared to how it happens outside under FERC jurisdiction, and we have tremendous advantages here in Texas that those who are under FERC jurisdiction don't. So it's a real benefit to Texas. But I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to that point and cover anything else you'd like to. Thank you.
Before I go to the members, under F, this is for all three of you because I want you to address the members. Three of the members are on an oversight committee on SB 2627. And you have the Texas Energy Fund, and I know there was a June 1st basic start of a new deadline. So each of you or one of you give the update to the members because that information came through this committee. So Thomas, are you going to start?
Yes, sir.
Or again, state your name and position.
Sure. Thomas Gleason, Chairman, Public Utility Commission of Texas. So as Chairman Hunter said, applications opened at the beginning of June. Prior to that, we had a notice of intent to apply period, where basically any company who may want the funds from the Texas Energy Fund had to raise their hand, come forward, and say, we're interested in this. Of that, we did a review of all of those notice of intents to apply. 125 projects are moving forward into the application phase, which will be about 8 weeks long. Those 125 projects represent approximately $38 billion in infrastructure development and 56 gigs of dispatchable generation for the state. So we will run through that process. Ultimately, staff will give the commissioners a recommendation for which projects they believe should be funded. All this will be handled in an open meeting, and we'll decide which ones need to be funded and then move those forward to a due diligence process where we'll ensure that these companies know how to own, operate, and maintain facilities as well as have the financial wherewithal to repay the loan that they get. Once that's done, we'll begin letting money and companies can start building hopefully very quickly because we need these megawatts on the system.
Any other comments from the panelists? All right,
covered it.
members. Representative Raymond.
I've had questions for the bookends. Let me start with you since you just mentioned. So 125 projects, but they're different categories of projects, right? The bigger ones and the smaller ones. So how many in each category?
I'm not aware, that's probably, we can.
Thomas, you got to state your name.
Sorry, Thomas Gleason, Chairman, Public Utility Commission. Representative Raymond, I'm not aware of what that breakdown is yet since this just opened. We can get back to you on that. I'll say there's a large number of companies. You'll recognize some, a lot of the incumbent companies that already provide generation in the state, as well as new entrants that have never provided generation in the state, have expressed interest in getting these funds. And we plan to run a process where we'll evaluate all those companies comparatively against each other. We'll have a value hierarchy of what we think we need in the state, and that's how we'll score and ultimately approve the projects.
Right, but what I'm remembering, unless I'm not getting it right, is that that there will be categories of loans, right? Like certain amount up to a certain amount and then a smaller amounts?
So the loans can be up to 60% of the project cost. That's all that we have. The other, everything has to be at least 100 megawatts to be able to apply, and then we have the caps on what can be spent. So for the loans, inside ERCOT loans and the completion bonuses, the bill envisions $7.2 billion. As you know, we only got $5 billion in this first tranche to actually spend.
Right. Hopefully more during the next session. Thank you. And so you'll follow up with us, just give us a little bit more.
Yes, sir. We will provide the whole committee with descriptive statistics around what the applications look like.
Okay. Mr. Vega, do you want? So I wanted to ask you on your slide where you mentioned House Bill 5066 and led to significant increase in large loads considered in studies, crypto mining. I want to ask specifically about crypto mining. We talked about this last year. We had a conference call with several members on there, and you started to tell us, and maybe you can revisit this, how many crypto mining, first of all, they're supposed to register with you, right? If there's crypto mining, but what you told us last year in that call, or maybe it was in my office, I can't remember now, is that give us a number that are registered, and then it's your understanding, and I don't remember how you knew this, that there were, you thought that there were a whole bunch who were operating and not registered. So I want to ask about that, what the numbers are, and then I want to ask what kind of impact they're having in terms of the load that they're requiring. I threw out in that conversation, and again, I don't remember which members were on there, that maybe we should consider legislation to impose a moratorium, depending on what you're telling us their demand is. So can you give us a little bit more?
Yes. Pablo Vegas, CEO of ERCOT. So legislation was passed that requires now crypto mining facilities to register with ERCOT. It's not fully in effect yet, but the legislation is passed and we're working through that process with the PUC on how to do that. What we talked about, and is still the case today, some crypto mining facilities are registered with us and we can track their performance on any given day on how much load that they're consuming. There's quite a few that are not registered with us that don't, and at this point in time, until the rules on how they have to register are imposed, won't be registered. And so we don't see, could be up to half of the total crypto load that's out in Texas right now. What we have visibility to is a little over 2,000 megawatts of crypto load that we can track. There could be upwards of about 4,000 or maybe more that's out there that we don't track. And so that's one of the challenges we have. And it's not just with crypto mining, it's also with any large load. We don't necessarily know exactly what kind of customer they are, what kind of energy that they're using, and that can make things difficult as the grid is expanding so quickly. And so to your question on legislation to require, to either put a moratorium on crypto mining, what would be more helpful for ERCOT is to have more visibility to what these large loads are doing. And so a good place to start could be making sure we can track and even potentially control the loads of cryptos, because cryptos are a unique business. Their use of energy is tied directly to the cost of electricity and the cost of Bitcoin. And so when either of those fluctuate, they either turn on or turn off based on whether they will make money mining. And so it would be very easy for them to be controlled by ERCOT because we could take their parameters. They could tell us when they want to run at what energy costs, and we could then ramp them up and down based on the price and scarcity of electricity that's available. That would be a much safer way to work closely with crypto mining from a grid operator point of view. The registration's a good start, and that'll get us a little further, but making them a controllable load resource takes it even further.
So Chairman, I don't know if we could put that in an interim report, but I hope you'll consider, that as part of whatever interim report Margot is going to write up.
That could be very helpful.
Because I think, I remember the concern raised about the Permian Basin, for example, and the impact that they were having up there, right? Isn't that-
Yeah, and a lot of the growth in that area is crypto, a lot of the new growth.
Thank you.
Chairman Thompson.
Mr. Vega, you and I had a cursory conversation about nuclear energy. Have you all, are you all studying that in terms of the cost, the benefit, the disposal of waste, if any, from that facility, and when we might be thinking about coming online with it, not to replace what we have, but I'm thinking in terms of the growth of our population and the great need for energy?
Pablo Vega, CEO of ERCOT. Yes, Representative Thompson, we're doing a lot of work on nuclear, being led actually by Jimmy Glotfelty, Commissioner Glotfelty on the PUC with the Nuclear Work Task Force. And we're going to publish a report at the back end of this year that's going to lay out the parameters and factors that would help to accelerate bringing new advanced nuclear technology into Texas to add and support the new growth that we're seeing. We'll look at everything from siting facilities and where's the optimal place to put them to be safe and efficient, what would be how we deal with the nuclear waste, the resources and the human resources required to operate and run these nuclear plants. There's a whole supply chain that needs to get built, and Texas is very well suited to do so with our education capabilities and with our natural resources here to really spur the development of nuclear. So this report that will be coming out in the second half this year will lay out how we can lead the country and move forward in driving nuclear development.
Thank you so much, because I was concerned because the longer we wait, the cost goes up.
That's exactly right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Chia.
Thank you, Chairman Hunter. Chairman Gleason, just a quick question, and thanks for briefing me earlier. I failed to cover this, so if you can cover this for me. essentially what you all have is the first end of the funnel in terms of the notice of intent from market participants in the energy fund. Was there any hurdle to get into that funnel?
Thomas
Like, was there
Gleason,
a bonding requirement or anything?
Chairman, Public Utility Commission. No, sir. This was just a first hurdle because we wanted to know, especially since we weren't given the full $10 billion and we have other programs to fund out of the Texas Energy Fund. We wanted to know at the top end level how many projects, how many megawatts, and how much money we could end up trying to fund, and it'll just funnel down from there.
So paper submission.
Correct. Just some, company description, some very, very high level description about the company and what they plan to do.
Right. So that's pass number one. And I'm going to say back to you what I think I heard you describe as the process. Pass number two will be a staff assessment. I guess staff and third-party consultants will take a look at the paper submission, the high-level paper submission, or will there be a more robust submission that is required afterwards?
There is an application that they all have to fill out that we have come up with, our staff, and we hired staff. In the bill, we got 7 FTEs. We also hired Deloitte to help us administer this program in consultation with the Water Development Board, who we talked to before we hired Deloitte about what we needed to help run this program. So yes, they will run through the applications. Staff will talk to all of the commissioners about what we feel as commissioners the value hierarchy needs to be, like geographic diversity, diversity of companies, things like that, diversity of sources, all types of things, come up with a scoring rubric and then score based on that, similar to what you would see with an RFP, is how I imagine it. Then they will make a recommendation based on those categories, but ultimately the commissioners will have to approve or disapprove or disallow projects to get funded.
And has the rubric been developed already?
It is in the process of being developed. We've started those conversations between staff and the commissioners individually.
And is there a not only a financial analysis, but also a revenue analysis of what they're projecting? Because you could be a business that has low cost of capital and still not make money in the marketplace, right?
That's correct. Yes, they need an ability to pay back, and that'll be part of the analysis. Obviously, with like publicly traded companies, that analysis is easier than with privately held companies. So Deloitte's going to help our staff go through all of that and make sure that everyone that we fund, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the fund, that everyone who gets funded has an ability to pay that loan back.
Gotcha. So funnel staff analysis according to both geographic, let's call it market-based rubric, and then financial rubric, then recommendation to the PUC, directly to the PUC about what projects merit funding.
Correct.
Gotcha. And then that recommendation, once approved, then I guess you'll have a documentation phase where loan documents will be developed and all the financial instruments necessary to accomplish the loan happen.
That's correct. Through a due diligence phase to ensure that we have all of the documentation to ensure that we can enter into an agreement that the controller's office, the safekeeping trust who actually holds the fund, is comfortable in making payments to these companies and are assured that they can get their money back.
Gotcha. But I guess what I was trying to understand was you get to the approval phase at the commission level. Does due diligence happens after that?
Correct.
Okay, so there is still an opportunity for the deal not to make after approval, right? When you get into diligence, that will, I guess, be run by staff and third-party consultants.
That's correct.
Multi-agency, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
So we have enlisted the help of the Water Development Board when necessary because we don't have the background at our agency having run programs like this. So we have used experience from the Water Development Board when needed.
All right, and then you would move from diligence to closing, and that's when, unless there are hiccups, I guess, you would go ahead and have loan documents executed.
Correct. We'd execute
and the
loan
obligations
documents.
begin.
That's correct.
And then you're at close, all the documents get signed up. What is the go-forward monitoring that you're envisioning so that you know that the loan is performing, that covenants are being adhered to, et cetera.
Right, so they will have to put up 3% escrow, every project that is funded, all those companies. And then we will do, similar to what we do in our contract management, we will do monthly reporting. They will have to submit progress reports on construction, on, where they are, where they're meeting timelines, if they're over budget, if they're, over schedule. All of that will be handled through our staff and the third-party contractor.
Gotcha. And you feel like you've got the back office to be able to execute that?
We do. We've hired most of those 7 FTEs to help administer it on staff, and then have spent a good amount of money to hire Deloitte with their full, they can bring to bear their full capacity to help us ensure that this runs smoothly.
Is the agreement with Deloitte flat or on an hourly basis?
I believe it is a fixed price contract.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question for Mr. Vegas. You've got a kind of a closing slide on, I guess, slide 9, about a new era of planning. And there's a couple bullets that grab my attention. A new era of transmission system planning is necessary, and recommended transmission projects to meet the large load could far exceed prior annual average infrastructure projects. So it sounds like those are pretty consequential statements. So I wonder if you could just talk to us about what that new era of system planning looks like from ERCOT's perspective, and what policy considerations maybe before the legislature in the future to help ERCOT be able to execute that planning successfully.
Yeah, thank Pablo Vegas, CEO of ERCOT. So, really, we're kind of in an unprecedented position here with seeing such a large step up in the potential for this load coming to Texas. When we designed our transmission planning processes back, over the last 20 years, the way businesses came into Texas really aligned more closely with the timetables to develop the infrastructure to support them. If you thought about a traditional large steel manufacturing facility, it would take several years to build and develop. And through a planning process, we could make sure there'd be adequate transmission to serve them. And the market would see that this load is coming. And so the generation resources would be contracted and developed in order to serve them as well. And that's how the process worked over the last many years. Now we're seeing load show up in a much faster timetable. So crypto is a good example of that. Crypto and data centers both can be developed much, much faster than traditional large industrial loads. We can see resources that are in the hundreds of megawatts and getting into the gigawatts of load show up on the system in 12 to 18 months versus 36 months before. So what we need to do is we need to anticipate where we are going with this kind of growth. And if you believe the economic potential of Texas, we should start looking at some step changes in how we plan for that. One of the things that we're looking at is looking at higher voltage transmission, like a larger highway system for the electricity. A larger voltage system would enable us to have more flexibility. And because we don't directly plan where generators build their generation supply, we want to have as much flexibility as possible so that wherever it does show up, that it's able to get to the load that's coming. Larger voltage, higher voltage systems enable that better. You don't have to be as precise with where you build the transmission facilities when you're at these higher voltages. It's also much more efficient from a perspective of using land and the natural resources when you develop transmission lines. So we have always planned the transmission system in Texas at the 345 scale. We are looking at both 500 kV and 765 kV levels, which are quantum steps forward in terms of what they can move power around the state. That's a big change. And I think it's time for Texas to look at a new transmission backbone, given how fast and how much we want to avail ourselves of this incredible growth that's coming. That's one example. Another thing that I think is going to be important is looking at these, where generation needs to come. Even though we can't cite where we would like generation to go, we could point out where hubs of generation would optimally be able to access the transmission grid and get to where we expect load to be. And so we're working to develop this concept of generation hubs to show these are ideal areas throughout the state where there's access to all the infrastructure for a generator and would give you the most cost-effective transmission system in order to serve the growth that's coming. Those are a couple of ideas that we're putting out there, as well as getting into more real-time continuous planning. But these step changes are really important for us to be able to keep up with the kind of growth we're looking at.
So, thank you. With respect to the capacity of the transmission and increasing it, my understanding is some states or some grids, I guess, have that technology in
They do.
parts of the country?
That's correct. There's 765 kV technology and 500 kV technology. Both exist in other grids in the U.S.
Okay. In terms of ERCOT evaluating that, is that something that ERCOT can implement on its own? Does it require the involvement of the commission? Does it involve the involvement of the legislature? Just trying to understand what the decision process is to be able to.
The way that process would work, we're working very closely hand in hand with the transmission service providers themselves, so the large transmission operators. And they're the ones that would bring forth the actual projects that would be approved by the commission. But what we're doing at this stage is we're looking at and we're working together on a plan on what it would look like to build out a higher voltage system with them. So we will run it for the whole state for all of ERCOT. ERCOT has that ability to do that. And it would kind of show what it would cost, the amount of infrastructure that it would require. And so then we will bring that plan to the Public Utility Commission to evaluate. I don't know that there's legislative changes specifically required for the PUC to be able to authorize a new transmission development plan. But so we would come to the commission and we would jointly decide, does it make sense to move in this direction? And if so, then the transmission companies would bring those specific projects that fit into this plan forward for consideration, and they would have to get certificates of convenience and necessity approved by the commission in order to be able to develop that and put it into rates.
Okay, and what's the time frame for that, for ERCOT bringing that plan to the commission?
This the last half of this year, we'll have that plan ready for view and for discussion. So it'll be before the legislative session.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, panel. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
We're going to have our next panel, and that's Walt Baum, Mark Bell, Julia Harvey, Michelle Richmond.
You all right?
All right, thank you very much. I've got a little different order, but we'll begin with you, Mark. So, Mark, would you state your name and your position and give us your 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mark Bell on behalf of AECT, the Association of Electric Companies of Texas. AECT is a trade organization of electric companies representing all segments of the electric industry, both in and outside of ERCOT. As an association, we are united in the common purpose of providing a safe, reliable, and affordable supply of electricity. While the last month may feel like summer, technically it doesn't begin for another 10 days. Already we have seen a tremendous amount of storm activity, causing outages in every corner of our state. And we're due for the most active Atlantic hurricane season that the NOAA has ever predicted, with as many as 25 named storms and 13 hurricanes. Our member companies continuously monitor weather conditions and maintain a year-round preparedness posture. The ERCOT region is expected to have sufficient installed generating capacity to serve peak demand, and the generating fleet has been working through its maintenance plans to ensure availability. Our member companies work closely with the Texas Division of Emergency Management, the PUC, ERCOT, and other state and local entities before, during, and following an event to maintain and restore power safely, systematically, and quickly. They continuously communicate with their customers and provide year-round assistance, including energy management tools and bill payment assistance. In addition to weather challenges, we have seen extraordinary growth. In May, ERCOT set a new peak demand record at over 77,000 megawatts. To put that number into perspective, that number is higher than ERCOT's all-time August peak demand record just 4 years ago. And yet, that is still less power than ERCOT consumers needed and used this winter. Demand for electricity in Texas has risen by 25% over the past decade, compared to 5% for the nation as a whole, with estimates that it could rise another 51% in the coming decade. Peak demand, the time that we consume the most electricity, has grown 18% in the last 5 years, and estimates suggest that it could increase by 77% in the next 10 years. And over the last 2 summers, Texas has set 21 new all-time peak demand records. Data centers in the DFW area, semiconductors in Central Texas, industrial electrification in the Houston, Beaumont, and Port Arthur areas, oil and gas electrification in the Permian, and population and commercial growth throughout our state present significant challenges for generation, transmission, and distribution. All that to say, Texas is growing, and the electric system is the backbone of that growth. Strategic investment in electric infrastructure is essential to our economic future and to maintaining reliability and affordability. In the last session, the legislature created the Texas Resiliency Act to allow utilities to a better mechanism to plan for and invest in resiliency projects. Projects that will help utilities better withstand extreme weather events and restore power more quickly to the consumers and communities they serve. These projects are smart investment in infrastructure for the future, helping to reduce cost, which benefits consumers and saves money in the long term. And our utility companies have begun to file the resiliency plans with the PUC. Investment in infrastructure also extends to investment in generation. In the last session, the legislature created the Texas Energy Fund. The initial phase of the Energy Fund appears to be an overwhelming success and is proving beneficial for capital investment in new dispatchable generation. AECT member companies have announced their plans to apply for these funds, potentially adding needed dispatchable megawatts to the overall generation mix. All of our members continue to invest in the grid to meet this tremendous demand and growth, and they are intently focused on providing a safe, reliable, and affordable supply of electricity to the consumers they serve. And when it comes to affordability, electricity prices in Texas are below the national average at 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Texans have the 12th best electric rates in the nation. And depending on the customer class, those electric rates range between 10% and 20% lower than the national average. And for the last 10 years, when adjusted for inflation, Texas electricity prices have been lower than the inflationary rate in all customer classes. Providing a reliable and affordable supply of electricity is fundamental to our core principles and essential to Texas's economic success. In a recent poll, when asked about their highest priority, given the choice between reliability and affordability, 65% of Texas voters chose reliability. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the work that the legislature has done in giving us these tools for reliability, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Mark. Michelle, if you'll state your name and your position.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Michelle Richmond on behalf of the Texas Competitive Power Advocates, or TCPA. Just a reminder, we're comprised of dispatchable generation companies that kind of run the gamut between publicly traded, those that are privately owned, as well as private equity investments. And so we represent companies that are what you would consider to be traditional incumbent generators, those that have been in the market since the market opened over 20 years ago, to newer entrants into the market. Some of our companies, in fact, purchased into the ERCOT market in the last year for the first time. So we kind of run the spectrum of generation companies, but they are all independent producers and competitive market participants. So as you are aware, there were substantial changes that were made to the market and to the way the grid has been operated over the past 2 sessions. And as you can imagine, any significant overhaul, whether it's the electric industry or any other industry, does take time to properly implement and then to, of course, bear fruit for for what you are expecting to see. And so our market is no different. I would have to say TCPA is extremely optimistic about where the ERCOT market is headed, as the regulatory bodies are charged with implementing the legislation that you passed, and they're making very good progress so far. Our members have said for many years that adopting a reliability standard is kind of job one, because that provides the goal that we're trying to achieve. And it sets the picture for what the entire market, as well as the grid, and how it should operate. You know, you heard the PUC say they expect to adopt the standard in August. And we look at that as the market reforms coming together, because that should set the basis for all of the different product implementations that are underway at the Commission and at ERCOT. I do want to be really clear about what our members' expectation is as far as a reliability standard, because I think that sometimes people get confused, particularly when they hear mandatory reliability standard. So if we are meeting the standard, our viewpoint is the market is operating reliably, they're aligned and functioning well. If we're not meeting the reliability standard, then there should be some parameters in our market design and in the products that we have that the Commission can look at adjusting in order to better align the market outcomes that we want with the reliability that we want. So, to be clear, we do not believe that a mandatory reliability standard in any way provides any type of regulatory entity licensed to go out and procure capacity in order to meet that standard. We do not believe that that's the case. And so we want to make sure that y'all are aware that we find it to be very critical that when we're meeting the reliability standard, we do it through the competitive market. That provides the most efficient solutions as well as the most cost-effective solutions for both suppliers as well as consumers. So based on the progress we've seen so far and the signals from this body as well as the market overall with some of the changes that are happening, our member companies have publicly indicated an interest in building 10,000 megawatts of new gas generation in ERCOT. And again, that comes from a very broad cross-section of member companies. Some of those were through notices of intent to apply for the Texas Energy Fund loans. Some of them were through general announcements, but all of those have occurred over the last month. So these are current interest. And that really indicates an optimism with the direction that our market is headed, and that it's going in the right direction. So just like a puzzle, all of the pieces that y'all have passed over the last couple sessions are going to be implemented to create the overall picture for what reliability looks like in ERCOT, and the market's roadmap for achieving that reliability. So we think it's critical that all the good work that has happened here be fully implemented. That provides some confidence to both consumers and suppliers about the stability of the market and that these are effective market principles that will be in place going forward. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with everybody in this building as well as other stakeholders and the regulatory entities to make that happen and to allow the economic development to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Walt, if you'll state your name and position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Walt Baum, and I represent Powering Texans. We're a new group backed by 4 members with a long history of providing power to grow the state of Texas: Calpine, Constellation, NRG, and Vistra. One of the primary focuses of Powering Texans will be to preserve, protect, and defend customer choice and the competitive market in the competitive wholesale market in ERCOT. We think robust competition has best served consumers, and we're here to preserve its benefits and ensure reliable and affordable power for Texans' families and businesses. There's a lot of good news going on in the wholesale market, but I also want to follow up on what some of the first panel talked about, and it's Texas, and it's summer, and it's hot. We've already seen weather-related outages caused by powerful storms. While I think the overall fleet is in very good shape and the workers who run that fleet will be the unsung heroes, there will be tight times this summer. Primarily, that's going to happen now in the evening hours when solar production is going down, and we're still running our ACs at our homes to cool. And then we've got to turn dispatchable generation up to meet that load. You will hear that ERCOT's going to be issuing conservation notices. On days when supplies are tight, you're going to hear about wholesale price spikes. Remember, that's the way this wholesale market is designed to work. And remember, when you hear about those high peak prices, those are for really relatively short periods of time, and they have little, if no impact to retail residential customers in the competitive market who are already on term contracts. But there is good news. The market reforms that the legislature passed and this committee passed to send investment signals, as you've heard, for dispatchable generation are producing results. And my members are leading the way along with other folks up here. I think we've handed out a press release of my 4 members have announced 5,000 megawatts of generation in the pipe, some of that through the Energy Fund and some of that they're moving forward with building right now. You wanted steel in the ground, and Powering Texans members are delivering it. But the Energy Fund was just one of the essential market reforms that the legislature passed. The PUC, as you've heard, is working on the critical rulemaking to set the reliability standard. And we do think that's critical, because once they set the reliability standard, then they can design the market structure to meet that reliability standard using the tools that we've talked about today, and that you've given them, including DRRS and the PCM. We think all of these reforms and the rules to support them create market certainty. And when there is market certainty, capital investment follows. Our history tells us that the Texas economic miracle is fueled by affordable and reliable electricity in a competitive marketplace. When the legislature opened up the wholesale market in the mid-'90s to competition, and then the retail market in 99, it's amazing what the ERCOT wholesale market has done, and just recently the growth in solar and batteries to meet the summer peaks exemplifies how dynamic that market is and how fast it can change. And I don't think a regulated wholesale market could keep up. The future tells us that more power and better load management are going to be needed to meet that growth. You've heard Pablo and others talking about the growth coming. Our friends in the oil and gas industry need electrification out in the oil patch areas to continue to grow. And you've heard about the data center load that's coming. The expected load growth is jaw-dropping. And the retail side, customers need tools to better manage their load. But I believe the retail market and their retailers will be able to provide them those tools. And those will best come from a healthy competitive market. Our experience tells us that a clear framework will deliver investment. When the legislature passed the 99 restructuring bill, there were lots of calls the next session to let's change this and that and this. And the legislature decided to stay the course and let the PUC and ERCOT work their way through rulemakings. And as you've heard, that's kind of the stage we're at now. And after the market was designed and clear signals were going forward, you saw a huge investment, and I think you're going to see that again. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Walt. Julia, if you'll state your name and your position.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Julia Harvey, Vice President of Government Relations on behalf of Texas Electric Cooperatives. As you may know, electric co-ops are not-for-profit, member-owned and governed electric utilities that are authorized by the legislature to provide all of the functions of the electric system within a service area. So we're organized a little bit differently than other market participants, but we are part of the larger ERCOT market, and we're directly impacted by the issues being discussed today. So thank you for considering our perspective. Like others, co-ops have been affected by the rapid evolution of the ERCOT system, and with some caveats, we support many of the recent and forthcoming market design changes because of the absolute necessity to incent and retain more dispatchable capacity for system inertia, to meet load in all hours, and to support reliability during long-duration weather events. As I said, we're member-owned. We don't have shareholders. So for co-ops, all costs are ultimately borne by our end users, and we are quite sensitive to that. But we know reliability costs money. And so the challenges for us really center on managing those costs, ensuring they're justified, and asking for transparency. And so we have some specific feedback on a few items. So first, like others said, allow the PUC to define the reliability standard in a rulemaking. We are encouraged that will be completed this summer because the standard will inform any incremental changes that we need to the market design to ensure that we meet our resource adequacy goals. And that standard, once it's defined, should be incorporated into the study of the performance credit mechanism. Another point I want to make, it's in the details, but it's important. Back in November, the ORDC, which is our scarcity pricing mechanism, that was modified with floors as a bridging solution to replicate the PCM outcomes. ERCOT produces this biennial ORDC study on its impact. We'd like to see the results that are coming this November, particularly to see if the ORDC can accomplish the same goals as the PCM, and to see how that modified ORDC implicates our objectives of meeting or exceeding that impending reliability standard. In addition to that, there's a couple other areas that we think need clarity. So first, conservative operations. That's the kind of, generally speaking, the posture where ERCOT holds more reserves at all times to be further away from scarcity. That posture, we understand it, but it's driven costs for co-ops. As I said, we know reliability comes at a cost, but the costs have to be foreseeable and reasonably commensurate with the benefit. And because the rules aren't clear, it makes it harder for us to anticipate and hedge the costs, and harder for our generators to take maintenance outages. So we'd ask that conservative operations be fully and clearly defined, because if you don't know the rules, the market loses credibility, and there should be some consideration of cost in comparison to the reliability benefits of conservative operations. And then finally, a related issue that's been brought up already, that's the long-term load forecasts that include prospective unconfirmed load. That was as a result of House Bill 5066. That was good legislation, Representative Guerin, because we know some of that load is coming, some of it's here, and it needs service. But it's important to us that a little more scrutiny is placed on some of the speculative load, because even releasing those forecasts had a significant impact on forward market prices. And the potential infrastructure cost to serve that demand is enormous. So we'd suggest a rulemaking on how to consider unconfirmed load in transmission planning, and that's kind of what Mr. Vegas discussed earlier, and I know there's a hearing next month on this legislation. So generally, as a status update, we're looking towards these PUC studies that are forthcoming, then of course the implementation of real-time co-optimization and the reliability standard. Once all the pieces of the puzzle are defined, we'll be able to better see the big picture, to better see how it all fits together. It's still somewhat of a work in progress, but we're looking for balance where load is paying fairly for reliability under clear rules, and where generators that provide that reliability have a reasonable expectation of consistency in their revenue. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Members? Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. So maybe it's too soon for me to ask you all, because I know you're waiting for the PUC to do their work and so forth, but if you have any suggestions, part of why we have these interim hearings is to look at things that we would do next session. And I think all of us are going to be back next session. And so, for example, I mentioned the Texas Energy Fund. Well, you had almost $39 billion in applications, right? Well, we don't have that much money. So would you all recommend, do you think it's a good idea, for example, for us to come back to that and put some more money into those applications, and maybe legislation that says, to make it easier, that we can take applicants that are already in the pipeline, that weren't awarded, right, that weren't given grants or loans, so that we don't have to start the process again. Something like that. you know, any ideas that you all would have that could help us prepare for the future, because, I mean, you look at all you gotta do is look at the graphs and sort of just live life in Texas to know we're gonna need more and more. I'm still concerned, and I think all of us are, that we could have a bad day or a bad week sometime, as we did, you know, a couple of years ago. And somehow it feels like it would be even worse during hot days and cold days. Maybe it's just bad, period, right? But if you have suggestions from your vantage point, whether it makes sense for us to like put more money into that, does it make sense to take the applicants that are already in the pipeline? I certainly would appreciate, you know, hearing from your associations on that.
Who wants to begin?
I'll begin.
All right,
Thank
Julia, state your name and position.
Sure. Julia Harvey with Texas Electric Cooperatives, Vice President of Government Relations. Thank you, Representative, for the question. You know, I think we would be supportive of additional appropriations for the Texas Energy Fund. I think it was envisioned as a $10 billion fund, and it's, you know, there's been $5 billion allocated to all 4 programs. And so if you just look at the oversubscription that we're seeing, I mean, there's interest, certainly. And once this process has played out over the next few months, we'll have probably lessons learned about it that maybe could be incorporated into some modifications to the framework. But we'd support additional funding. I think because it's public money, you know, it's important to us that it's, you know, the entire state benefits. And so we would want to see some of that go to the out of ERCOT program and not necessarily just loans for ERCOT facilities. But yes, we'd be supportive of additional funding and somehow streamlining the framework with lessons learned.
And what do you think of the idea that, again, to you know, jumpstart it, that we look at the pipeline of those applicants that are already in there? So we maybe open it up for additional applicants, but you've already applied, you know, and sort of you're in there already to not have to start all over.
Could foresee some efficiencies there. Maybe if you've already applied, it would be a straightforward matter to reapply. But
okay,
something to think about, yeah.
We agree with
Mark.
Yes. Oh, for the
name.
record, Mark Bell for Association of Electric Companies of Texas. I agree with Julia in that we should fund the energy fund as originally envisioned by the legislature, and you know, probably continuing to find efficiencies within the application process and is probably imperative.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Feel free. You are.
Walt Baum, Powering Texans. I think this was seen as a mission to try and kickstart the generation market, and I think we've seen the initial signs of that it's doing that. So I think the legislature should look at whether or not we need that next $5 billion. But I think, you know, if it's there, and because I think we will still need we've still got to meet the growth. You know, I think one of the things we've been talking about is this was one of the reforms, and as the PUC and ERCOT work their way through some of the other reforms, then you may see more generation ready to jump in the market. You know, it's one thing to help somebody qualify for a mortgage, like the Texas Energy Fund is helping you get a low interest loan. It's another thing to make sure that the job market is such that that person can pay that mortgage over the next 20 or 30 years. And I think some of the market reforms that y'all have passed and PUC and ERCOT are working on right now are working on that second part of it. So, you know, this is a good kickstart, and let's see what, you know, y'all can look at it like next session and see what appropriations need to be made.
Michelle Richmond, TCPA. Thanks for the question. I think we view it as the Energy Fund as a bridge tool while the market reforms are being implemented. It was envisioned as a $10 billion fund, so I don't think we'd have an issue with the additional $5 billion. I don't know that we would want to see it in perpetuity. Because we are working on market design changes that we expect would be implemented probably before you come back in the following session. And those should send the right signals to meet the reliability standard and get investment through the competitive market. As far as the applicants, I mean, it certainly offers a pool of applicants that have been vetted, which should streamline the process. I think it's possible that there could be additional qualified applicants that may be interested in it, and I don't know that we should necessarily shut them out, but certainly maybe start with those that have already indicated an interest and been vetted throughout the process, at least for this round.
Yeah, and I don't mean in perpetuity, but I'll tell you, if we don't have more electricity and more water in this state, I mean, we're headed for, in Laredo, we had to deal with the fact that we just had a report that we'll be out of water by 2040.
Oh, wow.
Okay? We don't have a secondary water source. So water and electricity. And so it's just trying to keep up with it because, you know, I remember the Water Development Board came to Laredo. We did a half-day session about 3 years ago. And they said on their records that we had about 1,200 people a day moving into Texas. They didn't even give us a report on how many new businesses there were, right? I don't even know what it is. The prior panel didn't reference that. But, you know, we better keep up with it or we're headed for disaster.
Michelle Richmond with TCPA, you have done an enormous amount of work on this over the last 2 sessions. I completely understand the concern. I think everybody is in the process of building, and we want to help meet that need. So
Help us figure it out, that's all.
Mark, did you have something? Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mark for AECT. I think the important point to make, and I think everyone on the panel has made it, is that we can't overstate the importance of regulatory certainty. And to Michelle's and Walt's point, the legislature has done an enormous amount of work over the last 2 sessions to help provide tools in the toolbox for the wholesale competitive market, and I think it's in the interest of the market to see those tools go through the regulatory process and come to fruition.
Other questions, Representative Dean.
Light's not working down there, Chairman? I had the light on. I didn't know if it wasn't working. No problem. I don't know. This is just a general statement question. Y'all can answer if you want to, but I think it's as we continue to look at the program, the energy fund, that we really do need to consider the non-ERCOT areas as well. You're using their taxpayer constituents' dollars to fund other areas of the state, and we're excluding some multi-million people from the program, and I think we should be looking at how to include them in various different programs to help them upgrade their specific programs. The other thing, from a reliability standard, and I think I heard Michelle talk just now, we're talking about the frequency, the magnitude, and the duration, but we don't talk about the pricing. And how we protect consumers. We're meeting those 3 principles, but pricing's out of sight. How do we actually make sure that there's a pricing reliability standard as well? Thank you. Don't all jump in.
Mark for AECT, Mark Bell for AECT. Representative, agree about the non-ERCOT areas, and I think that's why we saw the resiliency measures within the energy fund in there, and I think it's important that we continue to invest in and fund those projects through the energy fund. Agree.
And to follow up, Julia Harvey with Texas Electric Cooperatives. Agree with both points. As you know, we have co-ops in your district outside of ERCOT that face some challenging circumstances, and so this funding should be available to them because it's taxpayer dollars. And then on the reliability standard, there should be some consideration of the cost to consumers, and that can be done through the the use of in the modeling, the use of some assumptions around what it's worth to consumers. And we see, I believe, in the modeling some reflection of that, where there's a kind of total system cost assumption, and we can see the variability of that if you kind of choose different approaches. So I think that is being considered, and it should be as one of the factors as it's developed.
I just want to make sure that was being, discussed as part of the development of the standard. That, it's great to have the standard. I think we all agree with that. But I mean, at what cost to the consumer?
Michelle Richmond with TCPA. On the pricing issue, it is a delicate balance for sure, and I think that's one of the reasons that the Commission and ERCOT are doing the value of lost load survey that they are doing, is to see what consumers are wanting in terms of reliability. What is that price point that becomes too much for them, so that they can take that into account and provide that balance. And they are doing it based on the different types of consumer classes, because the tolerance is going to be different whether you're a residential consumer or you're commercial or you're industrial. And so I think that is a balance that they're trying to thread, but it is important.
Okay, thank you.
And members, raise your hand because we can't see your lights. So this one. Any other questions? Thank you all very much. And we'll call our next panel up, Jimmy Glotfeldy and Judd Messer. And while everybody's changed, just a reminder of the committee's 13. Make sure during the interim between now and the end of the year, I want all of you to be reaching out to the individual members so everybody's office is included. So thank you very much. And Commissioner, why don't we start with you, if you'll state your name and position, and we'll give you your 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Jimmy Glotfelty, Commissioner of the Public Utility Commission.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today to speak to our progress on nuclear power in Texas. Representative Thompson, thank you for bringing it up in the first panel, and I look forward to working with you on it. As you may recall, on August 16, 2023, the governor asked the Public Utility Commission to evaluate market design, siting, safety, and other challenges that may impede new nuclear plants or small modular reactors from siting and operating in Texas. Since naming the 18 members of the Texas Advanced Nuclear Reactor Working Group in October of 2023, we have held hundreds of meetings, formally and informally. Much of our work can be found in PUC docket 55421 to ensure transparency with the public, as documents are filed in there and meeting notices. To date, we've done quite a bit of work. We have polled industrial facilities to gauge their interest in new nuclear plants to provide power and steam. We have polled data centers, semiconductors, and other high-tech businesses as to their interest in this technology going forward in Texas. We've hired the UT Austin's Bureau of Business Research to determine the economic impact of building 5 new reactors in the state. We've developed maps and engaged with national labs, the Water Development Board, Ports, the General Land Office, on a multi-level siting analysis at former coal sites around the state. And we will be going back to them with a second tranche of about 20 sites for them to evaluate for us. These are some of the tangible accomplishments that we have created. Quickly, to take you back, what are the assets we have in our state? We have 2 operating nuclear plants in Texas, total of 4 units, Comanche Peak and South Texas Nuclear Project. There's an opportunity for expansion at these sites, first and foremost. We have research reactors at Texas A&M and the University of Texas, which are providing data to assist the NRC in the licensing process, which is the biggest challenge. We have uranium mining in South Texas. We use nuclear isotopes in medical centers around the state. And we have the Texas TCEQ and Bobby Janeka, Commissioner, are spending and leading efforts on mining waste and other fuel issues. In the future, new designs, both microreactors, which are generally below 10 megawatts, and small modular reactors, which are up to 300 megawatts, are safe, fuel and water efficient, smaller than existing plants. projects have been initiated in Texas at Abilene Christian University to build a reactor. Dow Chemical with partner X Energy in Seadrift, Texas. Texas A&M has put out a request for information for a reactor at their Rellis campus. And companies like NOV, National Oil Well Varco, and Diamondback are exploring opportunities for microreactors in the Permian Basin. These new reactors provide electric power to consumers. They provide process heat and steam to our industrial base, clean energy to our military bases, improve power quality to the semiconductor manufacturers, 24/7 clean energy to the data centers, medical isotopes, lower cost of desalination of water and hydrogen. To make these opportunities a reality, our working group is evaluating these policy issues from the perspectives of those end users, the manufacturing and the supply chain to make that happen at a reasonable cost, the state and federal issues, including some market design ideas that we would provide to the governor and the legislature to make these reactors a better reality in Texas, and potential education and workforce needs in the state. We will have a final report to the governor by December 1st, 2024, in accordance with his letter to us. It's our hope the legislature and the state leadership will act on many of our recommendations. The time for new policy and financial investment by our state leaders in nuclear is now. Other states have taken the opportunity. They meet more regularly than we do, and they have provided state resources that they are considered the leaders in this new nuclear space. I think we will leapfrog them after this legislative session. We can be the world leader in the supply chain with the fact that we have the fabrication facilities for the oil and gas industry. If you think about a offshore platform, it's steel, it's metal, it's concrete, it's pumping systems and electrical systems. They're all built on different places and assembled in a new site and shipped offshore. Those are all things that are going to happen with small modular reactors. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the Representatives Guillen and Spiller and the rest of the members of the Nuclear Caucus for their participation, and I'm very happy to answer questions on nuclear from any member of the committee.
Thank you. Judd, state your name and your position.
Good morning, Chairman Hunter and members of the committee. For the record, Judd Messer testifying today on behalf of Advanced Power Alliance. APA members represent operators and developers of wind, solar, battery energy storage, and other generation projects in Texas and around the country. Collectively in Texas, their investments represent about $110 billion of capital investment. And as I'm sure you're aware, Texas ranks first in installed capacity of wind and solar and is rapidly approaching the lead in battery energy storage too, with almost 7,000 megawatts. Since we last spoke to the committee in 2023, our member companies have continued to invest quite a bit in Texas, really based on two main factors. The first is customer demand. The vast majority of our projects in Texas are secured by long-term fixed-price contracts known as power purchase agreements, or PPAs, with large commercial and industrial consumers of power. The lower cost energy and commercial predictability for our partners in those PPAs enables them to keep their operating costs low, justifies additional investments, brings in further economic development. And then the second factor, which you've heard quite a bit about today already, is load growth. ERCOT predicts load growth by 2030 may reach up to 150 gigawatts, nearly double the record that was set last August. And with the rapidly increasing load growth, the state is requiring all megawatts to meet its needs, and renewable energy is providing a significant contribution to reliability while also providing downward pressure on wholesale power prices. On average, wind and solar are providing more than a third of the power needs in ERCOT, and batteries are continuing to break records, including on May 8th, when the grid needed it most. As you look to the future, you'll see the ERCOT queue has some pretty robust numbers when it comes to my member companies. If you look at advanced stage development, the projects that are most likely to come online There's about 33,000 megawatts of combined wind and solar. And there are some projections out there that energy storage could reach double what it is right now by the end of the year. Additionally, and thanks to the efforts of you all, the legislature passed the Texas Energy Fund, and as you've heard, has received notices of intent for about $40 billion in financing and almost 56,000 megawatts in new dispatchable generation projects. I would like to mention that APA member companies are continue to experience significant curtailment of the power they generate. Congestion on the transmission system increases cost to the ratepayers and increasingly is having a material impact on reliability. As you've heard quite a bit from the IMM over the last couple of years, as you've dug in on these issues, congestion costs exceeded $5 billion in 2022 and 23 combined. And ERCOT's most recent energy emergency alert last September was largely due to the constrained transmission lines in South Texas. We are encouraged by the investments under consideration to support load growth in the Permian Basin, as well as some of the things that Pablo Vegas mentioned earlier about additional investments into high voltage lines. But still, transmission can be one of the most cost-effective and efficient tools to ensure that we have a resilient and reliable power grid. And we're continuing to encourage consideration of more robust long-term planning, but also options to upgrade facilities outside of new build so that those stranded power assets right now can start to contribute to reliability on a regular basis. We feel that failing to meaningfully improve the system now will likely result in more costly and more frequent reliability events later. So with this continued evolution of the grid, there's a need for market policies that focus less on how resources perform individually and more on how they effectively work together as a system. A grid that recognizes the complementary strengths of all of its assets, including low-cost renewables and energy storage, leveraging those sides or those facilities alongside the robust fleet of thermal power, and continues to make forward-looking investments in transmission is the most efficient way, we believe, to achieve maximum reliability at an affordable cost to your constituents. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Then you better get out before you do. Thank you both very much. And again, like I've asked, please keep all the committee offices informed. Yes, sir. Thank you. Next, if Tony and Hector and Todd will come forward. Thanks for all being here. Tony, let's start with you. If you'll just state your name and who you're with, and we'll give you the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hunter. I'm Tony Bennett, President and CEO of the Texas Association of Manufacturers. And TAM represents over 600 manufacturers, including many of the state's largest employers. Texas has 20,000 Texas manufacturing companies operating in every region. They employ 924,000 Texans who earn an average compensation of $105,000. So really important industry. Manufacturers are by far the largest consumers of electricity in our state. That's why electricity has remained our association's top policy priority for the last 2 decades. Reliable and affordable electricity is vital for Texas industry to safely and efficiently operate their facilities. Even the smallest disruption at today's advanced manufacturing plants can suspend production and delay recovery for days or weeks, costing millions of dollars each day. Unplanned power interruptions can also create serious health and safety risks at these plants. Cost is also pivotal. Electricity is among the top 3 production costs For most manufacturers and for some of our members, electricity is up to 70% of the total cost of production. Many of Texas' largest manufacturers pay hundreds of millions of dollars annually to power their facilities. When conducting site selection for new industrial plants here in Texas, reliable electricity supplies are essential, especially for mission-critical industries like semiconductor fabs, petrochemical plants, refineries, and aerospace defense plants. ERCOT's competitive, efficient wholesale market and deregulated retail market are major drivers for these companies to locate plants in Texas. The ERCOT model has provided business with the flexibility to contract for retail electricity tailored to their individual needs and risks. Texas manufacturers believe that competitive markets provide the most innovative and efficient solutions for our state's grid. ERCOT's market rules allow load and all generation technologies to compete with pricing that rewards generators who show up when reliability is critical. But TAM recognizes that market incentives must reflect ongoing reliability needs. So tailored solutions are required to incentivize additional dispatchable generation. TAM continues to oppose heavy-handed government intervention like installed capacity mandates. TAM member companies have firsthand experience with other regions in our country where capacity markets have caused substantial cost increases while failing to improve reliability. Texas should not go down this road. Instead, TAM supports policies that will directly compensate dispatchable resources, including generators and demand response providers, for supplying energy ancillary services or reserves when the grid needs them most. One example is the Operating Reserve Demand Curve, ORDC, which provides a real-time bonus payment to generators that increases with the level of reliability risk. TAM also strongly supported most market design changes adopted last session. The Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service has been discussed already. That will provide an additional revenue stream for dispatchable generation and increases price signals for new investment. Good progress is being made. TAM greatly appreciates the efforts of this committee and the legislature to advance creative programs to improve grid reliability, including recent passage of the Texas Energy Fund, which you've heard a lot about. But we believe the 125 potential projects and the over 56,000 megawatts that could produce and the $38 billion in loan requests, that is a signal in itself that we think sufficient incentives exist in the ERCOT market today to encourage additional dispatchable investment. TAM members also believe that responsible transmission planning and construction is essential. It takes a long time to build transmission, both the big wires and the distribution wires, and they must be in place well in advance of need. 2 sessions ago, the legislature passed SB 1281, which implemented the triggers for building transmission. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Hector, you'll state your name and your position.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. I'm Hector Rivero, President of the Texas Chemistry Council, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. TCC represents 67 member companies who own and operate over 200 manufacturing and research facilities across the state. With over $250 billion of investments across Texas, our industry is responsible for about 500,000 Texas jobs, pays over $2 billion in state and local taxes, and is the state's largest non-energy export with over $50 billion in exports to customers around the world each year. Reliability and our grid and competitive cost of electricity are key factors for the viability of the business of chemistry in Texas. Reliability is extremely important to maintain safe and continuous operations at our sites. The business of chemistry is an integral part of our state's critical infrastructure. Among the thousands of products made here in Texas, our industry makes chlorine and caustics for our water treatment facilities to provide safe drinking water. Caustics are also used by oil and gas refineries to produce gasoline, refined petroleum products. And our industry produces medical-grade helium, nitrogen, and oxygen that are vital for our hospitals and emergency rooms. These are just some of the products that are essential during statewide emergencies. Our manufacturing facilities are vulnerable to unplanned power disruptions. As Mr. Bennett pointed out, unplanned outages can force emergency shutdowns, which elevate safety risks and can take days to safely restore operations. Outages can also significantly impact the production of the very products needed during emergency recovery efforts. Electricity is also one of the largest costs for our industry sector. Some of our industrial sites do generate their own electricity for their manufacturing needs and have the ability to export power to the grid in times of need. But all of our members are net consumers of electricity and pay hundreds of millions of dollars each year to meet their energy needs. Now, let's be clear, Uri was a historic winter storm to our state and certainly exposed supply chain vulnerabilities. And in 2021, the legislature did a great job to address weatherization of the entire supply chain and improve communication with the state's critical infrastructure, which includes the petrochemical industry. Today, we have coordinated communications between state agencies, gas producers, generators, transmission, and other critical infrastructure sectors that provide better preparation and execution in advance and throughout major state emergencies. As Chairman Gleason pointed out and Mr. Bennett, the Texas Energy Fund has proven to be wildly successful and has demonstrated that the market is very attractive for new generation as well. While weatherization and low interest loans improve reliability for our grid, we are still seeing electricity prices that are much higher than they were before Uri. According to the Market Monitor report published just last month, the average cost of electricity last year was $65 per megawatt hour versus $47 in 2019 and $36 in 2018. Now, while the price did drop by 13% over 2022, the cost of natural gas dropped by over 60%, which is a significant disparity. We thank you for installing guardrails to protect electricity customers in our state, and we urge the legislature to remain vigilant to keep the needs of electricity customers a priority with regard to our market design and keep electricity costs competitive. We fully support the legislature's efforts to address reliability concerns, but urge you to allow competitive market forces to work as they were intended. It is important that we not take actions that will drive up the cost of electricity unnecessarily and become a disincentive to new industry investment, or worse yet, impact the operational sustainability of existing manufacturing in our state. We look forward to working with the committee and the legislature to preserve and protect a competitive electric market design in Texas.
Thank you, Hector. Todd, if you'll state your name and position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, representatives. It's good to be with you today. My name is Todd Staples. I serve as president of the Texas Oil and Gas Association. And on behalf of our member companies who produce about 90% of our state's crude oil and natural gas and operate a vast majority of our state's pipeline, refineries, and LNG facilities, and who paid $26.3 billion in state and local taxes and state and revenues last cycle, we want to say thank you for your diligence in making certain we have a competitive electricity market in Texas and a reliable one. Oil and gas operators should continue to grow in terms of need for electricity in the next few years. Most of our operators rely heavily upon electricity today, but as they expand and continue to electrify other portions of their operations, the need is even going to grow more in terms of needed generation and needed transmission capacity. You've had a lot of testimony today. We concur with some of it that's been presented. We have a little different perspective on some, as you might imagine. I will say that we agree with those that have testified that allowing the PUC and ERCOT and stakeholders to implement the tremendous work that you've done over the past two sessions is very important for market stabilization and certainty to continue to attract the kind of growth I think that all of us recognize that we need for our electricity generation market. We do think that's very important. And having said that, though, implementation of these in order to manage cost and efficiencies is extremely important to the entire business fabric of Texas and to attracting new businesses to our state. You'll remember last session, a diverse coalition of consumers expressed concern about capacity markets in Texas. We expressed concerns about a California consultant conceived product called the PCM and what it might do to our electricity market because of the concerns. And I'll share with you a couple of examples as a reminder of why these type products are very concerning to us. According to reported data in 2022, rapidly deployable plants account for 18% of ISO New England's nameplate capacity, but only produce 2% of the system's total energy, indicating an over-reliance on capacity payments rather than actual energy production. Another example that I think is very important, in the PJM interconnection, the capacity market has resulted in nearly $120 billion cumulatively paid or pledged for capacity payments between 2007 and 2024 without corresponding improvements in grid reliability. So you got higher costs and grid reliability is not improved. And these have not resulted in proportional benefits of energy supply. And this is based on an analysis by Monitoring Analytics that we can get to you if you'd like it. To protect consumers, you did put a net cap of $1 billion on the PCM, considering about $40 billion a year is spent in our Texas electricity market. We believe that there are ample tools that have been referred to and referenced already that are going to generate the reliable revenue needed to attract the additional generation capacity, as has been testified to by the good success with the TEF today. Just to put the final cap on why we're concerned about products that aren't based on market transactions and they're more administratively based. In the December IMM report, they stated that the cost of ECRS procurement was 50 times higher than the estimated cost, 50 times. So if we have the speculative products, consumers are the ones that ultimately pay. And I will tell you that wholesale generation prices do fluctuate. We recognize that, but make no mistake, the ultimate payer is the consumer as hedges and contracts are renewed. And we have examples of that. We have testimony from our companies that their costs have increased 40 to 50% of their contracted cost, and they're very sophisticated buyers when their last contract expired until the new one. We've seen the average on-peak power cost in Texas in 2023 was more than twice of that of what our competitors in Louisiana paid. It's almost twice of that in a couple of other markets, and it's 20% higher than that in California. We should never be paying higher prices than folks in California, is my thinking on that. So we've got a lot of work to do. We're partners with you, and we want to make certain that we're here developing solutions. We thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you all very much. Questions, members? Chairman Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rivera, you mentioned that we should not be driving up the cost of electricity. Would you expound on that, please?
Yes, ma'am. Hector Rivera, Texas Chemistry Council. Thank you for the question, Representative Thompson. For the very reasons that Todd just described, our industry is very competitive, not only with other states, with other countries. And because electricity is such a major cost factor in the decision on where to locate facilities and make investments, every significant increase in cost is a chalk mark against Texas. And there are already other factors that are also major competitive factors. The state of Louisiana is one-upping us with tax incentives to try to lure projects away from Texas. And because of these reasons, it's imperative that we not only have reliable electricity, but also cost-competitive electricity for our industrial manufacturing.
What kind of tax incentives is Louisiana offering?
Well, the legislature was graceful in creating a new, Texas legislature was graceful in creating a new incentive this past session, House Bill 5 that Chairman Hunter authored. But there were changes made to it that really made it difficult for a lot of companies to actually execute on. Well, in response to job requirements, investment requirements, and the caps on the percentages of abatements that would be allowed. In response to that, the governor of Louisiana came forward and passed legislation to say that there shall be no job requirements for any new investments in the state, and that they would offer those incentives to bring that investment and that new tax base to their state, and cited that we urge any companies considering investments in Texas to take a closer look at Louisiana. Those are the types of tactics that are being played by other states. And as a result, it is a critical factor, like the cost of electricity, that factors in whether or not a company will site a new facility in Texas over another state or another country.
Thank you very much.
Representative Turner, then Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here this morning. I have a couple questions. One, Commissioner Staples, good to see you. You mentioned cost of electricity in Texas being higher than a certain number of other states. I think you mentioned California and Louisiana. We heard earlier testimony today that the cost of electricity in Texas is below the national average. I think both things can be true, but I want to ask, do you agree with that?
Well, data that I'm looking at from Todd Staples, Texas Oil and Gas Association. I'm new at this, I'm sorry. So data that we have from the Energy Information Administration reflects that for all sectors of Texas, electricity consumers increased 8% from Q1 of 2024 to Q1 of 2022. If you compare that to Louisiana and New Mexico, they declined in their costs. So yes, we're below the national average, but I think it's an overwhelming statistic when the cost of the input of most of our dispatchable power, about 45% of natural gas, has declined by 62%, and yet we haven't seen the corresponding decline in the wholesale energy prices, which ultimately consumers pay.
Understand. And like I said, both things can be true. I just want to make sure we're all dealing with the same facts. So thank you for that. And then you all three of you, I think, mentioned your support for reliability. We all want reliability. And we heard earlier testimony about ERCOT and the commission moving forward to adopt a reliability standard, which, as I understand it, would be a standard of one loss of load event every 10 years. Do your association support that specific standard or that goal in the adoption of the standard?
So, Todd Staples, Texas, okay. We're evaluating that reliability standard. We recognize that there's been a reserve margin for a number of years that the system has been operated under, and we're looking to correlate those two. We want to make sure that when looking at a reliability standard, it doesn't create a situation to where it adds cost without corresponding energy production, if that makes sense. We just think we want to be very cautious on how this is looked at and then how it's implemented and how it's managed. So we're not averse to that conversation, but the inputs are important in the way that's managed so that it doesn't create an artificial component to where prices are increased without corresponding electrical capacity, generation capacity. That's our concern of that, so we're watching it closely.
Tony Bennett, Texas Manufacturers. We have experts that are going to work with the regulatory agencies on that. Representative, we are cognizant of the need for reliability. Most of our member companies, particularly in the semiconductor fabs and the refineries, petrochemical plants, all of these critical infrastructure plants, they will tell you reliability is number one. You cannot run a semiconductor fab if it flickers. And we are working with the regulatory agencies and look forward to coming up with something that works for everyone, particularly a little bit better situation for consumers if possible.
Hector Rivero, Chemistry Council. To your question, Representative Turner, I agree with my cohorts up here said. We are carefully, anxiously waiting to see what that reliability standard is going to look like and what the matrix of that looks like before we render an opinion. But I think what's really important when we look at reliability and cost, it's a real tricky task that the PUC and ERCOT have, and we understand that it's a difficult task at hand. But if you look at what's happened with pricing as well, we absolutely need reliability for the reasons we described. But when you look at what's happening with pricing, one of the ways we're getting there is by having an increased demand reserve where electrons are not being used, but they're being paid for. And so we want to make sure that we have a market design that will provide that reliability and carefully predict what is needed to maintain reliability for homeowners and businesses in our state, but that is not going to artificially elevate the cost of electricity for electrons that can't be used.
Okay. And I guess to follow up, Matt, and I understand you obviously want to look at the details before you say if you would support whatever standard is ultimately proposed. But in terms of the goal of one loss of load event every 10 years, I mean, is that a goal? Is that a good goal for our state to have? Is that a goal that your associations support?
Again, Hector Rivero, Chemistry Council. Certainly, one every 10 years is a lot better than what we're dealing with today. So clearly, we want better. We want more reliability. We want Tony's manufacturing plants to not have interruptions. We want our chemical plants to not be disrupted as well. And I'm sure Todd wants to make sure they can continue producing the oil and gas needs of our state as well. So I think we all feel that we want improvement in our reliability. Again, we want to look at the entire construct of that reliability standard before we render judgment.
Okay. I take it you both agree with what he just said. You don't have to repeat all that.
Yes, sir.
If you agree.
Tony Bennett, Texas Manufacturers, we agree.
Yeah.
Todd Staples, Texoga, we generally agree too. Demand response is a part of that reliability standard in order to meet those goals. So there, as he said, there's a lot of factors we want to look at. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, question to you first. There have been a couple of references to, I think, 2 different IMM reports. And is there a website where we can get them, or do we get emailed the reports? Because I know I haven't seen them, or at least they haven't been brought to my attention. I'd like to see them. So
What we'll do is I'm asking our clerk to find those and get them to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So a question to Tony and Hector, because Tony, you said concern about unplanned power interruptions. So for both of you, have there been any unplanned, or to what extent have there been unplanned power interruptions? Unplanned power interruptions for your members in the last 12 months, let's say?
You want to answer that one? 12
Yeah,
months.
I can tell you to starters, when you look at Winter Storm Uri.
No. I said the last 12 months.
Oh, in the last 12 months, there certainly have been some disruptions in the Houston area that have forced some plants to do emergency shutdowns. Also, we communicate closely with ERCOT and the PUC. If there is a risk of there being outages, they may ask industry to curtail, so there have been some curtailments. But we certainly haven't had the wide-scale shutdowns that we experienced during Winter Storm Uri.
But what you've experienced, have they been centered around storms or?
Yes, sir. Yeah, primarily weather events and major.
Okay, so non-weather, let me rephrase the question, non-weather event related. I'm just curious to know what your members, how your membership's doing, your companies. Are they having a lot of unplanned power interruptions?
Sure. Hector Rivero, Chemistry Council. There have been a very minor few, probably more associated with transmission issues that are there, but not again, not anything wide scale that we see during major weather events.
Okay.
Tony Bennett, Texas Manufacturers, I would agree that, it's
So you haven't
much
had-
improved,
You haven't had
non-weather.
any? Okay. You haven't had any?
I could not, I would have to find out if there have been, I'm
Well, there
sure.
probably haven't been significant ones because you probably know.
No, right,
Okay.
correct.
I just wanted to make sure. I want
Yes,
to know
sir.
where we were on that.
I would agree
And
with
then, Tony, I wanted to ask you, because you said something, has there been any heavy-handed government intervention in Texas?
Not yet. With regard to capacity markets.
Okay.
And that's what I was referencing.
Not yet means you think it's coming?
The PCM has elements of a capacity mandate that we hope the policymakers do not adopt. I think our prior testimonies and meetings with regulatory agencies, that should come as to no surprise.
I got you. And then I wanted to ask Commissioner over here, I guess I'm hearing there are more opportunities, LNG opportunities in Europe for Texas. Is that true? And then would that help overall?
Todd Staples, Texoga. Yes, the demand for LNG in Europe continues to be very real and present. The pause on LNG export permits has caused a lot of disruption in conversation to where
How do we unpause them?
yeah.
Never mind.
It is very real. I mean, other markets are looking for other sources and countries that don't share the same value system that we have here in America and that are not our allies. And so we have several projects that are under construction in Texas. Several of our existing facilities are already in the process of expanding their capacity. So the ability to ship Texas LNG globally and to bring those dollars and those jobs back home continues to
So
grow.
the demand is going up in the up in part because of Russia probably. And
Russia has a fact, the Middle East, the Red Sea disruptions, all of them.
So, but yes, I remember, of course, hearing about these pauses. So what has been paused? Where is all that?
So the administration issued a pause to approve new permits for non-FTA countries. And the reason that that's a problem is because our LNG companies, not only in Texas but nationally, have to have signed contracts to be able to go FID to fulfill their plans. Some of those plans did get put on pause because of that halting of the approval of those permits. It's said that it should be over within about a year, but it's like traffic backing up on an interstate. You're going to find a different route to go, and if you go to a different supplier that doesn't have these disruptions, it's very problematic. We've had testimony from multiple different countries that says they need the United States to be that consistent ally that they can depend upon when it comes to LNG exports, and so we hope to get back on track very soon.
And so officially, what are the pauses? What have they said about the length of the pauses, or is that undetermined, or?
I was at CERAWeek when Secretary Granholm announced in March that this time next year it'll be in the rearview mirror.
Thank you.
That's my only official statement from them.
Speaker Guerin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd, can you talk to me a little bit about the transmission implementation on 5066?
Todd Staples, Texoga. Speaker Guerin, thank you for championing that issue. The Permian Basin is continuing to grow. The companies are electrifying their operations, and so House Bill 5066 called for the Permian Basin Reliability Plan. I want to compliment ERCOT, PUC, Commissioner Cobos, and the stakeholders for all getting involved. We think it's coming along very well. The recognized growth needs are there for oil and gas. We also know that growth needs are there for non-oil and gas, and that's the harder equation because the oil and gas companies commissioned a report that identified the growth needs, but the final report should be out in July. We're looking at it extremely closely. Our member companies are scouring it thoroughly, and we think that is going to be necessary to continue the economic success of Texas, is continue the economic success of the Permian Basin.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for pushing your member companies to comply and submit the necessary information for that report to come together. And I'd like to ask all three of you, yes, I understand that we're below the national average in electricity costs. What are we compared to neighboring states? Because I frankly don't give a damn what the electricity costs in California or Illinois, but I do care about what it costs in the states around us. Can y'all give me just a quick glimpse at that?
I'll get you that information so you have it. I do have the average on-peak power costs were $73. This is according to a published report from an investor-owned utility. $73 is what they received. The MISO market in Louisiana was $34. PJM and another one was about $38 or $39. And so there you have the direct comparison of Louisiana next to us was about half.
I know what natural gas costs, and it isn't anywhere near, the $10, $12 that it was even 10 years or 12 years ago, and we're down. They're not obviously they're not drilling a lot just natural gas because of the low cost.
Natural gas has been negative pricing for the last couple of months in the Permian Basin on average. It's just been
that's not reflected in electricity costs.
According to the IMM report, it has not been reflected. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Thompson.
When you all are comparing the electric costs to our neighboring states, are they comparable in the same the same batteries, the same
resources,
systems, and resources that we are using in our state?
Todd Staples, Texoga. We know that they don't have the amount of weather-dependent resources than Texas has because we lead the nation there. We think that they have a more heavy dispatchable power base than we possibly have, but I can get a direct comparison and get that to you because that's a great question, and we'll look at that. The efficiencies of these units, Madam Chair, is also a factor. The heat rate on how they function. I mean, and one of the things that we've kind of not talked about is that retiring plants that we know will be happening in the next few years, and the need to when you think about a future TEF, let's look at the net additions minus the retirement so that we get a real true picture of what we have. But we'll look a better comparison for you because I'm not prepared to do that right now on the neighboring states.
I just want to ask you something else along those lines. Do you know whether or not that they are utilizing nuclear power?
I'll have to find that out as well to give you a true comparison.
All of us want to lower electricity because it benefits my constituents.
Absolutely.
And we're looking for those tools and things of that nature.
Chairman Thompson, Hector Rivero, Chemistry Council. If I can add a little flavor to that in a different perspective, I think it's important for the committee to also understand that we live in a new environment with regard to climate policy. As you know, our administration has re-entered into the Paris Agreement, and as such, our industry, as well as most of the industries represented up here, are committed to trying to reduce their carbon footprint and to reach a net zero objective in a very timely fashion. When it relates to energy, electricity is one of the critical elements for us to achieve that. And so our industry, the petrochemical industry, is very committed to trying to look for green energy opportunities to help offset their carbon footprint. And so I think it is important that as we talk about the need for dispatchable energy, that we take into consideration how important maintaining renewable energy resources are for manufacturing that also have this heavy weight around their collars and commitments and investments of billions of dollars to get there. And so Texas, there's nobody better in Texas, right? And we want to attract that new investment. And we're fortunate that we have the renewable energy that we do have in this state. Our industry is also investing in battery storage technologies to try to increase the hours that a battery will work from 2 to 4 hours to 6 to 8 hours to begin with. Our industry is investing heavily in small modular nuclear reactors that the commissioner spoke of earlier. So we do think the entire mix of electricity is extremely important, and want to urge the legislature, as we are committed to find dispatchable energy, it is important to understand that the diversity of energy that Texas has is an advantage, one that we need to protect and somehow incorporate into the mix for the longevity of our economic ability.
And while we are talking about batteries, I'm assuming that there's continuous research to make improvements on better batteries, more efficient batteries, cost-wise and so forth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Any other questions, members? Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
If Thomas and Cyrus will come forward.
Came close to losing my shit.
All right, thank you. Thomas, why don't we begin with you, and if you'll state your name and your position.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Thomas Mercado, and I'm appearing today on behalf of the Steering Committee of Cities Served by Encore and the Texas Coalition for Affordable Power. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. The Steering Committee and TCAP consist of over 200 cities within ERCOT. Cities participate in the regulatory and legislative processes for two fundamental reasons. We desire reliable electric service for their communities, and they want reasonable rates. We advocate for reasonable rates not only for the city's own consumption, but also for the businesses, industry, and residents within their corporate limits. Cities understand that ultimately taxpayers pay their electricity costs, and if they're able to lessen that obligation, then that will ease the burden on taxpayers and assist the Texas economy. Cities have been active participants in the design and the oversight of the ERCOT market for the past 20 years. 150 cities are commercial consumer segment members of ERCOT, and city representatives serve on the Technical Advisory Committee and other subcommittees at ERCOT. Now, in pursuing their interests, cities have promoted a fundamental set of market principles that include, first, the fundamental objective of the ERCOT market should be to reliably deliver power at the lowest cost. Second, where competitive market solutions are possible, they are most likely to achieve this goal. Third, cities understand that achieving both reliable and economically efficient markets will necessarily involve trade-offs. Fourth, a fundamental principle of competitive electric markets is to shift the financial risk from customers to capital markets and capital market participants. The Commission and ERCOT should maintain policies that achieve this outcome. Finally, market and regulatory certainty combined with transparency of market design and operation will enable a robust market participation. And it's at this point that I want to depart from my prepared remarks for just a moment. A few moments ago, Panel 2 and Panel 4 testified before you. And I just want to reiterate and highlight some of the comments that were made. Walt Baum with the generator said that they would like market solutions, market stability, stable rules, affordability, a clear framework that will encourage investment, a wait-and-see approach on additional funding of TEF. We agree with all of those comments. Julia for the co-op said that they wanted a balanced approach, clear rules, consideration of cost to consumers. We support those comments as well. Mark Bell with AECT said that they were wanting regulatory certainty. We support those comments. And just a moment ago, Tam and the Chemistry Council talked about market stabilization and letting the market forces work. We support all of those comments as well. So I want to highlight that we're hearing a consistent theme both from those from various stakeholders throughout this process. The time since Winter Storm Uri has been very disruptive to the electric market in ERCOT, as you know, resulting in uncertain investment incentives and higher costs to consumers. The legislature, of course, responded in 2021 and again in 2023. ERCOT responded with conservative operations, and the Commission has implemented a lengthy list of market design modifications. Many of these market design changes shift value from consumers to the generation segment, and whether the investment market will respond without the need for reliance on continuing government financial incentives will remain to be an open question. However, we believe that the moment calls for market stability and clarity, just as the other commenters have stated today. The market modifications since Winter Storm Uri have cost implications for consumers. The preliminary data through early 2024 show materially higher average consumer rates over the past few years. Consumers incur costs for conservative operations, new ancillary services, and a whole list of new initiatives from ERCOT, the Commission, and the legislature. Specifically, in the recently released 2023 State of the Market report, the IMM emphasized the disruption to the market caused by the introduction last June of the ERCOT Contingency Reserve Service. The IMM noted that it has led to a doubling of the price of energy on average for the second half of the year, that one tweak alone. The ERCOT stakeholder process is working to mitigate, at least in part, the unnecessary cost impacts of the ECRS. Affirmation of the stakeholder process is crucial for consumers as well. In the report, the IMM recommended several modifications to ECRS procurement and deployment that will help mitigate those costs, and we support those modifications. Similarly, ratepayers have experienced significant increases in TDU rates over the past year. The 4 IOU TDUs in ERCOT alone have filed over 80 rate applications in the last 4 years, and more are coming. Reliability is, of course, a key priority, and we support it. And my last comment would be that we would just ask you to be mindful of the impact of your actions on consumers and ask that you take steps to rein in unreasonable consumer costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Cyrus, state your name. And
Thank you. For the record, Cyrus Reed, Lodestar Chapter of the Sierra Club, Legislative and Conservation Director. Sierra Club is the oldest and largest conservation organization. We have been very involved in the PUC and ERCOT process, are members of ERCOT and serve on a committee. My message to you today in 17 pages, which I'm not going to read, is don't forget the consumer. I think it's very similar to what previous speakers have said. There was a recent report from the National Energy Assistance Directors Association that showed that Texan families could spend as much as $858 in electricity over these next coming months, which is significantly higher than a lot of families. That is due in part to the climate's changing, and we have extremely hot summers and a lot of extreme weather happening. It's also because we tend to have some older builder stock, and we haven't invested as much as we should in energy efficiency. All those are factors that should be considered going forward. We look at the supply in the ERCOT grid, and we do see lots of new generation coming online, particularly solar and storage. I have some charts. We heard about the Texas Energy Fund. Beware some potential costs, but all of that is news that more generation is coming. But we're also seeing record peak demands. We saw one in May. We saw one last summer. As you heard from ERCOT this morning, they are predicting up to 162,000 in peak demand by 2030. We do have concerns about whether all of that peak demand is sustainable and real in terms of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. ERCOT, to their credit, has started an NPR process. I will say it's maybe not the full registration and transparency some of us would have liked. But we can have that discussion another time. But they have started that process. We do support the reliability standard, Representative Turner, the idea that we're going to have a 1 in 10 event, but also magnitude and duration. We are looking at the exact figures they have. What they've come out with in their draft, and it just came out June 6th, is very conservative, which could mean very high prices for consumers. So they have sort of an exceedance tolerance in the magnitude. The way they have set it may really have high costs. So we're looking at that, but we do support the idea of having a reliability standard. That being said, the reliability standard is a standard that ERCOT and the PUC should make sure we meet. The tools that are used can be a variety of tools, and those can include things like DRRS. We do disagree with the initial DRRS NPRR that came out because it is designed only to allow thermal generation, and we think battery storage should also be able to participate in that ancillary service, and we believe that was the legislative intent. We said if you can meet 4 hours, you should be able to provide that service. Allowing more folks to provide that service will reduce costs for consumers. That's very important. Another point in my testimony I put, I'm about to get to energy efficiency and demand response, but I want to mention ERCOT hired Brattle to look at the cone, the cost of new entry. We believe the initial draft has an extremely high cone, and that could affect consumer prices because our maximum cap and then our low cap are determined in part by the cone. The cone they've come out with is something like twice the amount that it is in other areas, and that's in part because of the technology they chose, and they're considering it a greenfield investment in the Houston area, which is probably the most expensive place to put new generation. So we hope that PUC will look at that carefully. I'm sure some other people in the room help as well. We do have some concerns about the PCM that have been mentioned. I've got some comments in there, and I won't go through that. Now let me get to the demand side. You've heard me say this before, but we can't meet our electric load alone through transmission and supply. We also have to look at the demand side. A lot of the peaks for residential and small business are driven by older buildings with inefficient appliances. We have some good news. SECO, the State Energy Conservation Office, has said they will be applying for about $690 million in federal funding that will help particularly low-income families apply for funding. That funding is likely to come in 2025. That will be helpful. We did have a bill that passed that you authored in the House, SB 1699. I know you worked with Representative Anchia and Representative Turner to increase demand response, residential demand response. The PUC has just opened up the questions on the potential rulemaking for that and potentially increasing goals for utilities. So we're just beginning that process, but we are way behind in terms of what other states do on energy efficiency and both utility and other market-driven programs. There's so much more we could do on that side. And with that, I'll be quiet.
Cyrus and Thomas. Members' questions? Chairman Thompson.
Tell us how we way behind in other states.
So every year, ACEEE, the American Council on Energy Efficiency Economy,
Say
I get that right?
Name and who you're with.
Cyrus Reed, Sierra Club. Every year, an organization called ACEEE puts out a report that compares the states and I have a graph on page 11, of the states that have energy efficiency goals, and there are, I believe, 25, 27 states, we achieve the lowest amount of energy savings compared to those other states, which means those other states are doing a better job.
Why?
Why, I believe, is because the legislature last adopted a policy and looked at the goals, and Representative Anchia will correct me if I got the year wrong. I think it was 2011 when you helped pass legislation that raised the goals. Since then, we haven't. Last session, as you remember, the Senate did pass legislation. We did not do so in the House. We do believe that a lot of those goals could be raised through PUC rulemaking. We're hopeful that will happen. If not, I'm sure I will be back here next session saying, let's consider it again.
And what was those goals?
So the existing goal we have right now says that utilities like CenterPoint Energy, like Oncor, have to design programs to reduce residential and commercial peak demand by 0.4% of peak, so less than 0.5% of peak. We suggested a goal of 1% overall of energy savings as a more appropriate goal. Those funds are paid for ratepayers, but if you look at the amount we're spending within ERCOT with these ancillary services, if you look at the reliability plans, Encore over $3 billion, CenterPoint over $2 billion, increasing funding for programs that actually save people in their homes, it's a much smaller amount. It's a much more cost-effective amount. And I'm happy to go by your office and talk to you more about it.
Thank you.
Representative Raymond.
Where did you say that we ranked in the 25 states, is that what we said?
Yeah, of the
State your name.
Cyrus Reed, Lone Star Chapter Sierra Club, of the states which have a required goal, and not every state has a required goal.
Around 25 states?
Yeah, around 25 states, we're last in terms of the amount of energy we
And
save.
where do we rank, where do consumers rank in terms of consumer rates in those states? Where do we rank in those 25?
I would have
Do
to.
we have the highest consumer rates?
Oh, you mean in terms of the price of electricity?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, we are not the
Where
highest.
do we rank?
I would have to get back to you.
Well, are we the lowest?
We're not the lowest.
Are we close to the lowest?
We're close to the lowest, but remember, residents don't pay rates, they pay bills.
Okay.
And so it's how much energy used plus the rate.
Balancing this out, so, because you're trying to make us look bad in one category, but let's just balance it out.
I'm not trying to make us look bad.
You made it a point, and point taken.
Yeah.
And if we can do better, fine, but just give us a balanced view here. Where do our ratepayers rank amongst all these states? And you say we're one of the lowest. You don't know if we're the lowest. We may well be the lowest, right?
Earlier today, you heard we were the 12th
We may well
cheapest.
be the lowest, right? Yes or no?
I believe you heard
We're
testimony.
one of the lowest, right?
We're among the lowest in terms of our electric
Right,
rates.
but you don't know, we may well be the lowest.
Well, you heard testimony earlier today that we were 12th, but I can check on that.
All right, thanks.
I am not trying to make us look bad. I'm suggesting there are improvements that could be made.
Questions, members? Thank you both.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Next, Eric Beverly and Emily Johnson. And members, just following along, we've kind of left the PUC ERCOT power section. We're going into the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission right now. So, Eric, why don't you begin, state your name, position, and then give us your 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Hunter, Vice Chair Hernandez, and committee members. For the record, my name is Eric Beverly. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. With me today is my colleague, Emily Johnson. Emily, if you could introduce yourself into the record, please.
Good morning, members. Emily Johnson, Deputy Director for Reviews, Sunset Advisory Commission.
Thank you, Emily. To briefly introduce myself, I was appointed Executive Director in August of 2023, having most recently served as the Deputy Executive Director for Licensing Services at the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. I'm very happy to return to Sunset, where I previously worked from 2011 to 2016. I've been able to observe and participate in the Sunset process from a variety of vantage points. I've twice served as a liaison for agencies undergoing Sunset review, have worked as a Sunset policy analyst on a number of complex reviews, and on the executive side, I've been responsible for the successful implementation of Sunset and legislative decisions. Based on my experiences, I come to my role with a few areas of focus. First, I understand that the Sunset process can be daunting and even anxiety-inducing for some agencies. As we meet with agencies, I've been communicating my intent and my vision that Sunset staff comes to each of these reviews as a resource to partner with agencies in the legislature to surface issues and identify recommendations that improve agency accountability, efficiency and effectiveness, and transparency with a focus on operational improvements. Second, I'm placing more emphasis on agency data governance, which is basically the way that agencies use data and information to inform their decision-making. Sunset staff have routinely identified data issues in agencies of all sizes. Third, while we are well underway on our review work for this biennium, I am looking forward to and preparing for the next review cycle when we're scheduled to review the Health and Human Services enterprise. That will, of course, be a big lift, and we're working to staff up appropriately and plan accordingly. I've provided the committee with 2 handouts. And there's a document, and within it, you'll find a second handout. So the first is our publication, Sunset in Texas, which provides an overview of how the sunset process works, the criteria we use to conduct our work, and a schedule for upcoming agency reviews through 2035. A couple of key metrics to share. For every dollar appropriated to Sunset since 1985, we have returned 16, generating $1 billion in state and federal savings and revenue gains. Since 2001, the legislature has adopted 80% of our statutory recommendations, and we certainly appreciate that. The second item is our review grid. This is an infographic that shows agencies under review and the order and duration of reviews for each agency during the current review cycle. Sunset staff do considerable work during the interim. We have already completed our reviews of the Department of Information Resources, the Texas Lottery Commission, and the Sabine River Authority. We have not yet had the opportunity to present our commission with our findings on these agencies and take our commission's questions. If you or your offices would like a briefing or have any questions about any of those reviews, we'll be happy to schedule time to visit with you or your office. Reviews that are currently underway are the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the Board of Pardons and Paroles, Correctional Managed Healthcare Committee, Wyndham School District, Trinity River Authority, Angelina and Neches Valley Authority, Lower Neches Valley Authority, and the Texas Ethics Commission. If you or your offices have feedback or concerns about any of these agencies, we'll be happy to meet. All input we receive prior to the publication of our staff report is confidential. After staff publish our reports, the Sunset Commission holds two kinds of meetings on each agency under review. First is a public hearing. That's when Sunset staff, agency leadership, and members of the public have the opportunity to provide testimony on the staff report and the agency itself. No voting occurs at this meeting. The second is a decision meeting. After reflecting on testimony, the Commission holds a second meeting to decide whether to adopt, modify, or not adopt Sunset staff recommendations. Commission members can and often do bring forward new recommendations, and this is when voting occurs. Some recommendations require a statutory change and will be rolled into a bill. Others are management actions that can be implemented using an agency's existing authority. Once management actions have been approved by the Sunset Commission, agencies can implement management actions as quickly as possible or as specifically directed. In the early days of legislative session, the Sunset Commission meets to take a final vote on Sunset staff recommendations and other recommendations that they have adopted, and we provide the Sunset Commission with a compliance report. The compliance report that we will provide to the Sunset Commission in January of 2025 will detail implementation of Sunset legislation and management actions resulting from the last legislative session. We kick off our compliance review this fall, so that work has not begun. We'll do so in partnership with the State Auditor's Office. That work will include an assessment of the Public Utility Commission, ERCOT, and Office of Public Utility Council compliance. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Stand ready to answer any questions you may have, and thank you.
Now, Emily, do you have anything?
I do not have any prepared remarks.
Thank you. Let me just get one thing clarified. So for the committee, on page 15.
Yes, sir.
Under the 2025-12 reviews.
Yes, sir.
That's what the next session's going to be looking at.
Yes, sir.
Those particular ones.
Yes, sir.
And for the committee, I think I heard you say DIR you have completed?
Yes, sir, we have.
And who else?
With the Texas Lottery Commission and the Sabine River Authority.
All right. So the remaining you will be reviewing.
Yes, sir. We've already begun a significant number of reviews, and we'll complete those during this interim.
Very good. And then a couple of these are under our jurisdiction.
Yes, sir.
So again, I'm going to urge you to keep the entire State Affairs Committee up to date.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. Eric, so I think I heard that staff's sort of early recommendation is going to be to sunset the Ethics Commission. Is that correct?
We've just begun that review, and Emily's supervising that review. They are not subject to abolishment under the Sunset Act.
Other questions, members? Thank you all very much. Go back to your review.
All right. Thanks.
Members, our last panel, I'll call up if Steve and William can come forward. And thank you both for being here.
Absolutely.
And Steve, why don't you go ahead and start and give us your name and your title and 5-minute overview.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Steve Peer. I'm Deputy Executive Director for the Texas Department of Information Resources. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. DIR operates on an outsourced, best-of-breed model that is generally regarded as about the closest thing to privatized state IT in the country. Through our shared technology services contracts, our cooperative contracts program, Texas.gov, and our phone and network services, we generate over $6 billion in sales annually, with $1.4 billion of that going to hub vendors. We do this using approximately 250 FTEs and about 500 to 1,200 program vendor staff. We're pleased to announce that we are undergoing our sunset review process with the Staff Commission report, as you just heard, having been published in May. We look forward to working with this committee to presumably move that bill forward next session. Several bills passed during the 88th session affecting DIR, each of which went through this committee. I'd like to update you on that legislation. SB 271 by Johnson and Shaheen required local governments, including cities, school districts, counties, and special districts to report cybersecurity incidents, including ransomware, to DIR within 48 hours, as state agencies have done since 2009. As of June 6, DIR has received 118 local incident reports, 45 of which have been from local government and special districts, 73 from public or charter schools. Of those 118, 90 have accepted DIR's offer for a consultation after reporting the security incidents. HB 4553 by Longoria and Johnson expanded and aligned eligible customers across DIR's program to provide technology services, security services, telecommunication services, and negotiated contracts and for IT and commodity services. Prior to this passage, the DIR customers had difficulty understanding which entities were eligible for which services, and this streamlined that process. Even the definition for state agency was different across programs. So the streamlining has alleviated that confusion and allowed our vendors and our customers to better understand what they qualify for. HB 584 by Capriglione and Zaffarini authorizes DIR to enter into an agreement with a public junior college district or a public technical institute to offer a program leading to a state IT credential to address shortages in the IT workforce. DIR entered into an agreement with Austin Community College, and we look forward to our first apprentice in the fall. HB 2060 by Capriglione and Parker created the AI Advisory Council to assess AI in state government. The council is charged with assessing the need for a state code of ethics for artificial intelligence systems in state government and reviewing how AI is impacting the constitutional or legal rights, duties, or privileges of residents of the state, and the potential benefits, liabilities, or risks that this state could incur with these systems. They will be submitting a report to y'all by December 1st. In the 87th session, this committee passed SB 475, a comprehensive cybersecurity and data governance bill that, among other things, created regional security operations centers, or RSOCs. The RSOC program was piloted with Angelo State University, and the past legislature, the 88th, appropriated money to add 2 new RSOCs, one at UT-RGV and one at UT Austin. Those facilities are currently in their build-out phase and are working to sign up local governments for increased monitoring and protection. As this committee well knows, there are many types of cyber threats against many types of entities. Threats against water districts have garnered a lot of attention recently, and the feds recently sent out letters to states as well as to water utilities to update them on the depth and breadth of this risk. DIR, along with DPS and PUC, is providing additional notification as well as guidance for these utilities as to the resources that are available to assist. While DIR has no oversight over these entities, we remain concerned and committed to doing all we can to assist. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. William, if you'll state your name and your position.
William Bali, college research professor, Texas A&M University, representing the Office of the State Climatologist.
Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Chairman Hunter, members of the State Affairs Committee, I'm a research professor in the Department of Atmospheric Sciences, and I'm representing the Office of the State Climatologist. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and to give you the latest outlook on weather conditions for the next several months as they may affect the power grid. I will discuss 4 types of extreme weather: severe thunderstorms, extreme heat, hurricanes, and extreme cold. Severe thunderstorms are on a lot of people's minds recently, given the havoc they have recently produced in Houston and Dallas. According to the historical data, damaging winds are most likely in Texas from the middle of April to the end of June. So we're past the peak, but significant risk remains. While other severe weather outbreaks can be forecasted up to a week in advance, the specific locations of severe weather are generally not known until the event develops. We have also seen extreme heat recently. Unfortunately, the risk of extreme heat will remain elevated throughout the summer. The Climate Prediction Center is a branch of NOAA that issues official seasonal outlooks. Their outlook for the rest of the summer calls for enhanced chances of above normal temperatures in Texas. Not necessarily as warm as it was in 2022 and 2023, although similar temperatures cannot be ruled out. With the Gulf of Mexico temperatures at record levels for this time of year, the air entering Texas will have a head start for high heat and humidity. The risk of extreme heat is largest where rainfall has been below normal in the western and southern parts of the state. The next threat to the power grid to consider is hurricanes. All seasonal forecasts this year are calling for an active hurricane season because all factors are favorable. The first warm ocean temperatures I mentioned aren't just in the Gulf of Mexico. They extend through the Caribbean and all the way across the main hurricane development region of the tropical Atlantic. This means that thunderstorm activity over the ocean will be above normal, and hurricanes will have plenty of energy to draw upon. Second, the tropical Pacific Ocean is about to enter what we call a La Nina phase. When that happens, winds over the Atlantic are more benign. They're less likely to rip a tropical depression apart before it can intensify into a tropical storm or a hurricane. The official NOAA outlook calls for 8 to 13 hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean and 4 to 7 major hurricanes this year. By comparing the historical number of total hurricanes to the number of storms bringing hurricane-force winds to Texas, we can estimate the likelihood this year of a hurricane striking Texas. The chance that at least one hurricane strikes Texas this year is about 1 in 2. The chance of 2 or more hurricanes striking Texas is about 1 in 6. Applying a similar calculation to major hurricanes, the chance that a major hurricane strikes Texas this year is about 1 in 5. The fall severe weather season usually doesn't bring strong winds, so the only hazard I wish to discuss continuing is that of extreme cold. The same La Nina that is influencing the hurricane season is going to affect our winter weather. On average, La Nina winters in Texas are relatively dry and relatively mild. However, that mildness comes with an enhanced risk of extreme cold because temperatures to our north tend to be colder than normal during La Nina years. The extreme cold air outbreak of February 2021 occurred during a La Nina year, for example, and outside of that period, the rest of that winter was relatively mild. Our research indicates that a repeat of the coldest conditions of February 2021 has about a 1 in 30 to 1 in 50 chance of occurring this winter. This does take into account the ongoing warming trend over the past decades, which is making such events less likely overall. However, the crisis on the power grid did occur several hours before the coldest conditions hit Texas. And given that, a repeat of conditions at the time of the power crisis is a bit more likely, perhaps 1 in 15. Thank you again, committee, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Let me start.
Absolutely.
So I live on the coast, and June 1st is hurricane season to the end of November. And I read all these weather reports from your office, 2024. How high is this compared to 2023, 2022, and 2021?
Pardon, can I ask a clarifying question? Is that in reference to the hurricane season?
That's hurricane season, and state your name.
William Bowley, Texas A&M University, Office of the State Climatologist. So currently the forecast is more severe than previous years. This is the most aggressive outlook that NOAA has issued for the Atlantic hurricane season. I will say the last few years have been remarkably quiet. in the Gulf of Mexico, especially given that prior to last summer, we'd been in a 3-year La Nina phase. So there is uncertainty in the outlooks, but other factors are present this season that weren't present in those years, which is part of the reason for that.
Are we higher than 2017 when Harvey hit?
I do not remember the forecast for that. You're right off the top of my head.
What is the projection for Saharan dust?
I have not seen any official forecast this year for Saharan dust. Given that winds are more benign in the Atlantic, that would generally mean there would be less transport of Saharan dust.
And so basically, we don't have the Saharan dust to actually stop the speed of the hurricane.
May not.
Correct? So basically, to the coastal residents, it's possibly a very high and active hurricane season.
Yes, sir. Given the outlook, it is one of the forecast is for the most active hurricane season we've seen so far.
And so from the grid standpoint, we need to make sure that information not only comes to this committee, but between now and November 30th, our grid operators, everybody involved in the grid, need to be prepared. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Members. Chairman Anchia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us the data again about the 1 in 2 chance?
Yes.
I just want to understand, I want to understand the data point specifically.
Yeah. These data points are given given the historical occurrence of hurricanes
State your
in
name.
Texas. William Bowley, Texas A&M University, Office of the State Climatologist. The chance that we will see at least one landfalling hurricane in Texas this year is 1 in 2, so about a 50% chance.
And does that data point also contemplate the severity of the storm?
No, that is anything that meets the classification for a hurricane. Any chance of a major hurricane, which that would be a category 3 or above on the Saffir-Simpson scale, is about 1 in 5. Okay. So in a given year, we have about a 1 in 5 chance of being struck by one of those storms.
In a given year, and is the chance higher this year than normal or in line with historical trends?
It's higher than normal this year.
Okay, for a category 3 and above?
Yes.
So 1 in 2 chance for a hurricane of any type.
Yep.
And a higher than average, than historical average chance for a category 3 and above. Is that to be present or is that to hit land?
That would be landfalling.
Okay, to hit land.
Hit land in Texas.
Okay. Is there any projection either in your prepared remarks or otherwise about the severity of the storms beyond the category 3 data point?
No, unfortunately, the forecasting as is now doesn't allow us to make guesses or make estimates on category 3, 4, 5 specifically. However, major hurricanes above that threshold, we can say there's a higher chance.
Got it. And tropical storms can also be devastating.
Yes, they
to
can.
The state. Any data related to things that fall below, to extreme weather events that fall below hurricanes that still may impact either the grid or property damage or lives in our state?
Yes, sir. William Bowley, Texas A&M University, Office of State Climatologist. I would say yes. There is actually a number associated with that. I don't have it in my comments in front of me. However, I could get it to you. They do issue a projection for named storms. So tropical storms are named once they cross that threshold from tropical depression. So the projection for activity of those is higher than normal as well. It's kind of across the scale.
It tracks.
It tracks.
It tracks the roughly. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to exact numbers, but the number of tropical storms will be higher than the historical average as well.
Yes, that's likely.
And with respect to hurricanes, you said this is the highest risk hurricane season that we've ever had?
It's the highest forecast of number of named storms by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
I guess would my shorthand roughly contemplate what the data tells you or what the forecast tells you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any Does your office have any view on the correlation or causality with the carbon that is present in the atmosphere? Does that increase either the frequency or the severity of storms?
With regards to our office, we are not conducting research in that area directly. And as a professional opinion, the research is still up in the air on that one. There are correlations, however, to reach a statistically significant result saying that hurricanes are doing X, Y, and Z, we haven't quite met that threshold yet.
In your professional opinion, since you referenced it, is it your opinion, or do you believe the IPCC consensus on the impact of carbon in the atmosphere with extreme weather?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to note that 2024, they do have names of the cyclones, correct?
Yes.
The name.
They do have a list of names. Right?
State your name.
Oh, William Bally, Texas A&M University, Office of State Climate.
Committee needs to know there is a Raphael storm on the list. And the last time we were hit, Anna was on the list. So, another question, because I want the committee to know this, because we have some other charges.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the Atlantic or the Gulf, when a hurricane enters the Gulf, does the climatologist office make that determination?
William Bally, Texas A&M University, Office of State Climatologist. No, sir, that would be the National Hurricane Center that would make that determination.
And so, members, so you understand, when the hurricane hits the Gulf, it enters, insurance stops. So that'll be something I want everybody aware of because of the other interim charges. But that's another issue, being this so active, I want you to be aware of that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Raymond.
Chairman, thank you. By the way, is there a Hurricane Shelby on there too?
William Bally, Texas A&M University, Office of State Climatologist. I have not looked at the full list of prospective names for this year's storms.
I have.
Is it on there? No. You're familiar with Dopplers, no doubt.
Yes, sir.
And are you familiar with the gaps that exist in Texas? How many do you know, more or less?
I don't have an exact number for you, but they are substantial. Actually, my office in College Station sits exactly in one of those radar gaps, and we're currently working with a private company to bridge that radar gap.
Well, I wanted to ask about that. So in Laredo, we're part of a gap, importantly because we're so close to Mexico, Monterey, and that area, so storms can come in, and we're just outside of Corpus Christi's NOAA, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, in Laredo, and Chairman, you'll appreciate this, someone from the private sector has purchased a Doppler, Beto Trevino, and has taken it to the city, so the city of Laredo now has that, and NOAA is using that data as of several months ago, maybe a year by now. I wanted to see if you could help me get a meeting with NOAA, maybe assist us with that, because I really think it would be good for NOAA to take that over. Even though the city has it and they're using the data, we know they're using it, but I guess it's unofficial. I don't know what the deal is, but do you know if NOAA is trying to get more of those gaps covered?
William Bally, Texas A&M University, Office of State Climatologist. Yes, sir. So the National Weather Service does indeed use radar data from privately held radars. That one that's going in College Station will be the same way. They will acquire data from that to infill their radars. As for the Weather Service is aware of the gaps, and I know there is an effort to fill them. I don't know the timetable. As for the meeting, our office would be happy to put you in touch with the National Weather Service.
NWS in Corpus Christi that we need. So if you would follow up with me and help me, maybe someone from your office could join us in a meeting with them. My thought is that I would like for them to come for us to set up a meeting in Laredo. You mentioned in your comments that we have sometimes about a week's notice that something's coming. So maybe when we know something is coming, and we'll invite the chairman in case he wants to come with, jump in the car and come with him. But if we know in advance, then we could get on their radar to get themselves over to Laredo when there's an event happening, and they can see the operation that the city of Laredo now has. Because I think in the end, like I said, it would be better if they took it over. So if you could help with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And then for Steve over here.
Yes, sir.
State your name.
Steve Peer, Department of Information Resources.
Thank you. So do you know, are we, this is increasingly a problem, right, with reference to the hacking and so forth. Do you know if we're catching these criminals and to what extent we're catching them?
Yes, sir. I'm a bit out of my depth here, but
Whatever you know. I mean, if you don't,
sure.
then that's.
Several of the federal government has caught several of the more nefarious perpetrators recently over the past couple of years, including the gentleman who spearheaded the August 19 ransomware attacks that affected 23 cities in Texas. But tracing them and capturing them is particularly difficult because most are
And is
based
the
overseas.
state involved in, do you know if the state, I guess, are these going to be federal charges for the most part?
Yes, sir. That's my understanding, is that they are federal charges. The state is involved in, by simply providing the information that we have to the FBI.
So helping get them. Now, so we don't have, I don't know, Chairman, maybe, but we don't have any state laws, state penalties?
If I can get back to you on that, I would appreciate it.
Please do. I'm curious to what extent the state, that we have penalties. I mean, you just hear more and more about it. I know I've mentioned before that in one of my school districts is constantly fighting these guys off. And I've had constituents, at least two, that came to me in the last 3 years where they were being, they were being blackmailed, essentially. And it's terrible, man. They come in and steal everything, and then all your records and your business, you're in a bad position, and they know it.
Yes, sir.
So you pay them, and sometimes they'll give you your information back, sometimes they won't. So, yeah, I'd like to know where we are with reference to how successful have we been in trying to catch these guys and what the penalties are. I have no idea what the penalties are. And then whether or not we should think about doing something at the state level.
Yes, sir. Will do.
Thank you.
And get that information to the clerk, because I want all the committee to have it, because those will be things we need to look at.
Yes, sir.
And I do want to note one other. One of the storms is named Chris. So I have a hurricane season you call one of the worst. So it's a competition between who hits me harder, Chris or Raphael. So there you go.
Let's hope for neither.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Last one's named William.
Ooh, man.
If we get that far down there.
Any other questions, members? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Members, I want to thank all the witnesses and you all for your participation in today's hearing, and that concludes today's agenda. There's no other business to consider. If no objection, the Committee on State Affairs will stand adjourned. Subject to call the chair. The chair hears no objection. The Committee on State Affairs is now adjourned.